start recording the meeting. Welcome to the August meeting of the Environmental Quality Board, or EQB. And my name is Nancy Daubenberger, and I'm the Commissioner of the Minnesota Department of Transportation and honored to serve as chair for the Environmental Quality Board. So with that, we will we'll have meeting announcements and roll call. But why don't we go to roll call unless there are meeting announcements?
Only if you have any.
I do not have any, so we'll go to roll call. Okay. Executive Director Neusler will go ahead and call the roll.
Right. This is more, again, it's more fun with folks in the room. I have to check it. I don't believe we're expecting Commissioner Arnold. Is anyone on from Commerce?
Jenna's here.
Jenna's here, okay. Board Member Bakken? I guess for meeting announcements, Madam Chair, I have heard we may be having a little bit of connection on one of our computers, so not, hopefully we can see everybody, but. Okay. Board Member Bauer Kemper. Expecting him a little bit late. I know he's got orientation this morning. Board Member Brands.
Here.
Don't believe Board Member Cunningham or Commissioner Cunningham could join us. And Assistant Commissioner Myra Kunis, are you out there? Okay, I think she had something come up. Oh, Chair Daubenberger.
Here.
Commissioner Gronball.
Here.
Board Member Hintz.
Here.
Board Member Katzenberger.
Here.
Commissioner Kessler.
Yeah, I'm here.
Board Member Martin.
Here.
Commissioner Verlek or Deputy Commissioner McKinnon. Board Member Nelson.
Present.
Commissioner Peterson.
Here.
Board Member Smith.
Here.
Commissioner Stroman.
Here.
And Chair Holman.
Here.
And do we have Chair Zelli or Board Member Vento at council? I know we did it. We had folks, stuff was coming up for folks this morning, but Madam Chair, that is 11 folks. We do have a quorum.
Thank you. Okay, so then next on the agenda is the approval of the consent agenda. So that is on page, let's see, 5 of your packet. There are the meeting minutes from the July 17th meeting. And then on page 3 of your packet is the preliminary agenda for today's August 21st meeting. So is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Can I do that in the minutes at the same time? Make that motion?
They're both part of the consent
Oh, part of
agenda.
the-
So,
okay,
so
we
have
need
to
to call
choose. So yes,
consent
yes.
I'll put the whole consent agenda. There.
Thank you. Commissioner Peterson, and do I have a second?
Second, Holman.
All in favor? Oh, I'm sorry. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor of approval of the consent agenda, say aye. Aye.
Hi.
Any opposed? Say nay. Hearing no opposition, the motion carries and the consent agenda is adopted. So now I will turn it over to Executive Director Catherine Neusler for the Executive Director's report.
All right, well, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you all for being here today. It's really fun to have folks in person and to have that chance to chat and get to talk a little bit. And in this world where we've sort of defaulted to hybrid meetings, we're going to be continuing to look for ways for us to connect and for meetings that we might prioritize for in-person attendance. I think I told y'all I'm already working on the 2025 schedule. I'm thinking maybe April and October next year, kind of spring and fall. But we'll continue to work on that. My extroverted self is really enjoying having all of you here. So thank you for being here. And thanks to all the people in the audience as well. Logistics, we are still hybrid. I expect we have some board members online virtually, some public members and tech reps online. So we are recording the meeting through the Teams world. If you are online, the meeting chat is open and visible to everyone, but we do not keep it as part of the meeting materials. So please use it only for logistical issues. Board members, we got a couple of presentations today. As always, your questions and feedback are very much appreciated. If you're online, feel free to raise your hand or just jump in. And it's helpful to have your camera on when you're speaking. If you're here in person, just signal to the chair that you want to speak. For members of the public that are with us today, there are going to be 2 opportunities to give some comment and input. The first one, the main one, will be related to our decision item 7, which is the fiscal year 25 work plan, and we will take comments specific to that item. And then at the end of the meeting, there'll be a general comment as time allows. So if you're here in person, please use the sign-up sheets to indicate that you want to make a comment. And if you're online, when we get to a public comment portion, go ahead and raise your hand in Teams. And then we'll queue commenters at the relevant points in the agenda and likely go back and forth between people in the room and people online. If you're in person, we'll call your name from the sign-up sheet. If you're online, we will call on you, and then when we call on you, you will be able to unmute and speak, but there might be a slight lag. And then as a reminder, the slides that show where to comment are up, but it's also in the meeting packet. So those are the logistics. In terms of executive director's report, not a lot today. I can't believe it's August and the state fair starts tomorrow. I know Commissioner Peterson got to meet the Princess K finalists today, and you're probably getting the horses ready for the show too. So EQB staff and our state agency partners are also prepping for the state fair. There is going to be a big monarch sculpture in the Eco Experience building up in the rafters. So go visit that when you have a chance. And on August 29th, we'll have Pollinator Day at the state fair with special events at the Eco Experience and partners and exhibitors at the Eco Experience and at the DNR building. And I believe Rebecca's going to be on a panel at noon in the Eco Experience. And I'll be there, and various ones of the staff will be there on the Pollinator booth that day. We're also planning to get out to the Minneapolis Monarch Festival at Lake Nokomis September 7th. So we hope folks will come and see us at those public events. And of course, we're also really looking forward to getting out across Minnesota for the Environmental Congress in late September. And again, Priscilla will have more about that in a moment, but we're already seeing people register and indicate they want to attend. So we're really excited about that. And I'm just looking forward to spending some time out in the world, talking to people who are interested in pollinators and all our work. So that's all I have.
Great, thank you, Executive Director Nuschler. So with that, does anyone have any questions for Edie Nuschler on her report? It's not hearing any, so we will go on within the agenda then to our first main item on the agenda, which is the Emerald Ash Borer, the agency and partner work update. And so I believe we have Rebecca presenting.
We might have been so speedy that she's still making sure all her books are
Oh,
here.
that's right. It's only 10 after. Yeah.
Madam Chair, while we are paused, I will just add, I did not have a question for Director Nuschler's report, but I will just add that I believe in the works for the Pollinator Day at the fair is also some sort of brief joint event between Bowser and DNR to mark the permanent funding that is now available for the Lost Legumes program. So that will be part of the
That's the 29th, you said, right?
Yep, Thursday the 20th. I think there's a series of events throughout the day at the stage at the state fair, and I just don't know what all of them are. So,
And there will be a series of different days with different themes at the DNR campus throughout the fair as well. I stalled long enough.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
well done.
That's perfect. Good information. All right. So as we mentioned, next on the agenda is Rebecca Gutierrez Moreno, and she's our state pollinator coordinator, the EQB, along with several members of the interagency ash borer team, or the EAB. and some external partners will present some updates on the state's work around the emerald ash borer. Thank you for being here today and welcome everyone. That I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, members of the board, and welcome members of the public. As it was said, my name is Rebecca Gutierrez Moreno, and I'm officially the State Pollinator Coordinator. However, this time I'm coming with a different topic, which is emerald ash borer, and we're bringing an update on the state efforts, and also we're going to have some partners sharing their experiences and talking about the issues and challenges they're facing. So I'm going to start just with a brief introduction on the subject. Hopefully this will work. Okay, so in this presentation, we're going to be talking, again, I'm going to give you a background on the emerald ash borer issue. And then each member of staff of MDA, DNR, and PCA are going to give you an overview, kind of like highlights on the progress and challenges they're facing on emerald ash borer. We're going to talk on next steps, things that we're planning to continue to do. And afterwards, we're going to have over here some of our guest speakers are partnering with state agencies on this issue. So for the board, the actions for today, this is an informational item. So you're going to be listening to the subject, and then there's going to be time for you to discuss agency and partners' efforts on EAB. And also, we will ask you to consider your continued commitment and support on this efforts for EAB. So that's the actions for the board for today. And I'm going to give you a brief background on this pest. It's an invasive species. It's originally came from East Asia, and it kills ash trees. Ash is the main host of this insect, and it kills them because the larvae feed on the parts of the tree that move nutrients up and down the tree. So after 1 year or from 1 year to 3 years of infestation, this insect may kill trees. And if depending on the severity of the infestation in several locations, it has been deadly for different parts of the state. And it's a big issue because Minnesota has the highest number of ash trees in the country. And, this threatens not only our natural resources, but also, well, that's the next slide, actually. There you go. The potential impact for this pest is, not only ecological, but also threatens our resiliency against climate change. And ash also has a cultural component for several indigenous populations and tribal nations in our state. So as you can see, there are some bullet points. As of 2010, 1 in 5 trees are ash in community forests. And in Minnesota, it comprises over 1 billion of ash trees. So it's a big problem. And due to the severity of EAB's attack and the consequences that it has, that it fully kills the trees, it's considered the top priority of tree invasive species, just followed suit by gypsy moth. And we know there's other threats as well. However, because of the impact that this one causes, it's a priority for the state to deal with this problem. So just for you to have a little bit of for those of you who have not heard about this topic before, and just as a refresher also, this is a little bit of a timeline of work that the state has done for EAB. So it was detected in Minnesota in 2009. In the country, I think it was 2002, but then it moved really quickly. And now in Minnesota, it was detected in 2009. And 2018, the board appointed an interagency team to start looking into this issue and trying to figure out what to do. In 2019, the Minnesota state legislature allocated $1 million for communities to start dealing with this problem. And the EAB team, which I think most of the members here were part of that team, developed a report with recommendations for state agencies to address this problem. And it was presented to the board, and the board directed agencies to come back in 2020 with more specific actionable recommendations for state agencies to do. And that was also presented to the board in 2020, and it included recommendations with current resources, but also recommendations if state agencies were allocated more resources to deal with this. And since then, the interagency team with partners and collaborators has been implementing those recommendations, kind of meeting regularly with each other, trying to see where there's opportunities for collaboration and synergism within each other. And so this year, it's been 4 years since the recommendations were brought to the board, but 5 years since the report was approved by the board. So we thought, it was a good time to bring an update on how things are going and what are things that are still needed to be done for this problem. I just wanted to show overall the key recommendations, and I know you have more details on the board packet with the memo that we gave you, and I know there's a lot of details there, but the key recommendations were around these 1, 2, 3, 4. Slow the spread, support communities, manage Ashwood materials, and lead, engage, and collaborate. With that, I'm going to give the word to Mark Abrahamson from MDA, and he's going to talk from the MDA's perspective.
Thank you, Rebecca. So Mark Abrahamson, I'm the Plant Protection Director, Department of Ag. Department of Ag, our role is confirmation, detection of new infestations, trying to prevent them to get to new places, which is a really hard job. And we do some technical assistance too with affected communities. So we kind of break this into 2 parts, kind of the first 10 years of Emerald Ash Borer and then the last 5. And you see there's been a major change in how things are going. So back in November 2019, we actually did a presentation to the board at that time on Emerald Ash Borer. And we had 21 counties which were infested. So as Rebecca said, Emerald Ash Borer was first found in Minnesota in 2009 in St. Paul. And so the Twin Cities have been affected for the longest period of time. But you can see 10 years in, the spread out to other counties had been relatively slow. And that graph represents the spread rate in Minnesota, the green dotted line, compared to the national average, the blue line. So for whatever reason, we can come up with some ideas, but the spread rate was slower at the beginning in Minnesota. Key point, though, is that spread detection always lags behind spread. So it takes about 5 years from the time Emerald Ash Borer gets to a place before there are enough symptoms to discover it. So we don't have good early detection tools. So at that time, back in November 2019, looking into the future, we were trying to predict, well, how is it going to impact the rest of the state and how quickly? So that black line up through 2019 was the actual spread rate to new counties. And then those lines coming off of it were different possible scenarios where that top red line was if it went as fast as it did everywhere else in the country, it would expand to the rest of Minnesota on a timeline, something like that. And then at rates slower than that going down. So obviously, the slower the spread, the better, because the best way to deal with Emerald Ash Borer is to not have it for as long as possible. However, it has expanded quite quickly, or we've discovered it in a lot of places during the last 5 years. Again, this isn't all spread during the last 5 years. We're kind of looking back into the past a little bit. Again, there's that 5-year lag. But here in August 2024, 52 counties, that will soon be 53. We have another county, Jackson, which is kind of that donut hole down on the southern tier that just was confirmed. We'll be adding that also. So it took 10 years to hit 21 counties, but only another 5 years to add another 32 now. So that has expanded very rapidly. So if we look at that graph I showed before, and take that black line out another 5 years, you can see that during the last 5 years, the spread rate has not been slower than the national average. It's matched or even exceeded what we would have, thought would be the worst case scenario. So it's been discovered over a much greater area over the last 5 years. And projecting that out into the future, if we anticipate, as we might, that spread rate is going to continue. By 2029, 2030, we would expect to have found Emerald Ash Borer in every county in Minnesota. Again, using that 5-year lag, you could argue it may be in every county of Minnesota already and just has yet to be discovered. Again, just the role of MDA, which is an important role, but relatively small resource-wise. Our responsibilities are detection, confirmation. We have a really good system for that across like the different states that have Emerald Ash Borer. I would say Minnesota has the best system for detecting, confirming, and then reporting on finds. We have an online map that's updated within 24 hours of every find that's confirmed. that shows all the places emerald ash borer is present in Minnesota. We've worked hard to try and slow the spread through regulation and outreach. Again, it's very difficult with emerald ash borer. And in Minnesota, this is kind of the worst case scenario where we have our densest population of people, a huge number of ash trees, and lots of opportunities for people to move that wood on their own to new places of the state. Really hard to stop. Technical assistance, the role of MDA, we work a lot with communities when emerald ash borer is discovered to get them up to speed on detection, management options. And then we lead biocontrol efforts in Minnesota, which are using other insects to control emerald ash borer, which is helpful, but not a silver bullet in the case of emerald ash borer. And with that, I'm going to turn it on to Val.
Excellent. Hi, everybody. I am Valerie McClanahan. I'm the Cooperative Forest Management Assistant Supervisor at the DNR, and I'm going to talk to you about some of what we've been doing and some of the continued challenges. So DNR is continuing with our ongoing efforts to work to address EAB on state and on community forest land. DNR has accomplished a number of actions recommended by the Environmental Quality Board, and much of DNR's work really falls under monitoring, education, technical assistance or management, and financial assistance. So some of those things that we've been doing include we conduct early detection surveys of EAB in our rural forests and EAB impact monitoring across Minnesota's forest biomes. Additionally, we provide support to academic institutions with research and write case studies about incorporating our findings from state land. We have and continue to provide education to foresters, plan writers, city foresters, arborists, residents for state land management, as well as community forest management and private forest management. And then under that management and technical assistance component, on state lands, we have been diversifying and maintaining forested wetlands where possible by adaptively managing those spaces, while also providing technical and financial assistance to communities and best management practices in our community forests. So with the support of the state legislature, we have been able to offer over $25 million in grants to communities and nonprofit organizations to address EAB on our community forest land. So this is really small for you, I'm sorry. So the current issues with our forests, starting with our black ash forest specifically. So without ash on these sites or some sort of replacement species to use the water table can rise to the point where you have an ecosystem state change from a forested wetland dominated by trees to a wetland dominated by cattails or shrubs. So the economics of it make it difficult to use timber harvest as a management strategy due to the low volume per acre and low demand. Timber harvests also have to be designed carefully on these sites because ash evapotranspiration keeps the water table levels in check, and they support the forested wetland system. As opposed to those non-forested conditions, you essentially need a certain number of trees on those sites to maintain the water table. All of these factors together make it really challenging to manage black ash sustainably in our forested lands. On the community forest side, a lot of communities are beginning to experience standing dead ash trees. The reason for this is often due to either a lack of capacity to address the increased ash mortality on public land or a lack of ability to support residential land. Communities have been so focused on managing ash that many have not been able to maintain standard of care for their existing trees, which often includes things like maintenance pruning of their large existing trees. When we see, they're in a reactionary space. They're not able to necessarily, they're addressing these emergency spaces instead of like the ongoing maintenance components. So without the maintenance of those trees, we're anticipating more storm damage, which we also anticipate more of with impacts of climate change. So low income and middle income homeowners may not have the capacity to manage their ash, creating dead trees and public safety concerns. It's been said that they have the structural integrity of a standing potato chip once they've been invested. When so many communities, and I'm noting personally that I receive calls and emails weekly from residents who have standing dead trees in their yard, and they're afraid that it's going to fall in their home or hurt their kids or something like that. And they don't have the capacity to manage, they don't have the financial ability to manage it. That support is really needed. Many communities really want to help their residents, but they're at an administrative capacity managing public trees that have made it difficult. So increased ash mortality has also had increased need for wood utilization efforts. Wood waste is increasing and significantly, and the storage locations for managing that wood waste is decreasing. So we have really gotten a ton done. There's still a lot to do, but the legislature has certainly recognized that EAB is an issue that has impact statewide. However, many of the initiatives and the recommended actions using new resources are still in need of resources. Additionally, increased spread has increased impacts, and the requests for support in communities and residents are anticipated only to increase as the spread and impacts continue to increase. Communities are really still in need of more support. We had the $25 million available to communities, but we received over $65 million in requested funds. When we're looking at the seasonal nature of the work, and just the labor force that currently exists, long-term ongoing support is needed to address EAB and its impacts long-term. Education and outreach remains an ongoing need as a means of reducing the impact of the spread and maintaining public safety. And then additionally, the workforce solutions, those things take time. Creating career pathways and getting people into the industry does take time. And there is a need for an increase in quality tree care professionals to meet that increased demands of treatment, plantings, removals, and things like that. So additional resources would allow for better engagement with stakeholders to develop market-based solutions for utilization and move simply from that consulting to that to enacting potential initiatives. And with that, pass it on to you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Tim Farnan. I work for the Pollution Control Agency. I supervise our planning and systems unit. And so the core work of my unit is with solid waste planning, dealing with that waste system. But want to make sure I acknowledge too that this partnership, working with the forum that EPB has presented us with, is really important. There are a lot of bigger environmental issues associated with trees and tree care that we recognize in the FDSA and its effects on climate, on stormwater, on air quality, all sorts of things that kind of cross the purpose of our agency and fit into our mission, even though my work is a little more focused on kind of wood waste collection and those types of things. And to that end, this partnership's been really helpful in collaborating with DNR and others on something that we feel like has been kind of underutilized or under-resourced, which is the focus on preservation of trees and tree care. And for somebody who's been in the waste management world for a long time, that's always our first preference, right? Is to prevent waste, to not have to have some kind of management for it, and to recognize all the benefits of continuing to invest in healthy trees and getting all the benefits that they provide to communities. So that's something that we've seen in the last few years hasn't been able to be prioritized as much as we would like. As Valerie mentioned, folks are really in a reactionary mode, and so that's put some pretty big strains on our system for disposing of wood waste and finding better uses for it, where we can kind of take the benefits and treat that more as a material that has value, and find products, mulch, and compost feedstocks and other things that would better utilize wood as the resource that it can and should be. So we've seen that strain on our system. And you'll hear some from me about that today. So, but with that, we obviously there's an opportunity. There's certainly lots of different emerging markets. You'll hear today from folks who are making products out of wood. We've got folks very interested in developing biochar, which could be a really useful climate mitigation tool and a good use of wood and would reduce the amount of waste that we have to manage. And lots of opportunities too for further mulching, further composting, for their other beneficial uses of this wood waste. Currently, we have been able to implementing recommendations that the blueprint that was put out in 2020 gave us. We actually hired John Uprich, who's our wood waste specialist. This is the first time we've had that position at the MPCA. He just started with us in the spring, but is really busy trying to figure out this issue and coordinate a number of programs for us. Included in those are managing some grants that the legislature gave us to help shore up some of the biomass plants in the state. Biomass plants are really a critical piece of infrastructure for managing wood waste. They play a very, very significant role. And so both District Energy and CODA have received some funding, and John is administering that and working with those entities to make sure that those state dollars are put to good use and that we have kind of the secure infrastructure that exists in addition to hopefully future opportunities to manage wood waste responsibly. Additionally, we've got a stakeholder group that John is convening for us, and that is helping us create a forum to engage with local government partners, but also the tree care industry, with folks interested in some of these alternative uses for wood, whether that's the entities making products out of wood or folks interested in advancing biochar development in the state, or halters and composters and those types of folks. And it's really the first time we've had resources to kind of bring that group together, convene them, hear about what their challenges are, hear about where they see opportunities, engage with them on what kind of policy and funding needs we might have going forward. And so we're optimistic that will position us better to be in a less reactive mode and a more proactive mode in months and years to come. Additionally, we have a relationship with our county partners, particularly here in the metro area, whereby we have a solid waste planning process. And for the first time in the last few months here, we have required our metro county partners to develop wood waste management plans. And so those plans will be submitted to us this fall. And we're hoping that they help us engage local partners and for those folks to think about what their own set of resources, challenges are to better position us to be less reactive going forward. We know that we need better data on wood waste. We currently, a lot of the places where wood is flowing are sort of outside of our permitting and regulatory system because we consider many uses of wood sort of beneficial use. There's a requirement for some of those types of facilities to have permits with us. So that's one of the things that we're engaging on is just trying to get better data, better understanding of where wood's flowing, where it's being generated, where we can anticipate future wood coming in. With the grant round that I mentioned too, we received some resources to do a competitive grant round to develop markets for wood waste. So that will be coming out this fall, where we hope to put some dollars towards some of those uses I mentioned earlier, whether that's making products out of wood, mulch, biochar, composting, or those types of activities. So the legislature gave us about $1 million to do that. We're expecting quite a bit high. A lot of interested applicants to pursue those resources. And so we're also looking at what other opportunities there might be for future funding to try and support that on an ongoing basis. At this point, the funding is really just for that singular grant round, but we know that the need is going to be there for long term. And that we're several years away from the peak of Emerald Ash Borer. And even after that, we're going to need wood waste management system for whatever the next best is for climate change and for the wood that flows through the system on a basis. We're also exploring some unique partnerships to try and help support some of these newer technologies, whether that's biochar or some of the creative wood harvesting techniques out there to make products, particularly in urban and community forests. And so have engaged somewhat in a closed landfill program to look at if those types of things might be kind of a testing ground or a resource or a place to do some of that work and engaging with our county partners on that as well. And then again, trying to think too and make sure that we don't focus all our time and energy only on what we do with wood at the end of its life, but partner with DNR and this broader community of stakeholders to figure out how we make appropriate investments in that preservation and in kind of continuing to value and support and recognize all the benefits that the trees out there can have for us if we're good stewards for them. So, back to Rebecca.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so as you all can see, this is a big challenge, and agencies are working really hard to make sure that we are addressing them correctly, but also, foreseeing what may be needed. And we think that the continued work that agencies are doing is necessary, and this collaboration that has started since 2018 can continue to be a priority for our agencies. And so as next steps, we are thinking of continued this interagency collaboration and expanding it to other agencies that may have, maybe some role in this, potential role in this, and inviting them to collaborate, but also look for opportunities to partner with other external stakeholders that may have a role in this as well. And finally, as next steps for this interagency work group would also be kind of revising those recommendations and updating them, because some of them may need updating based on the new resources that have been received, but also further resources that are needed. So that is it, I think, for our part of the presentation. Thank you so much. There will be time for questions in a bit, but we wanted to give a space for our guest speakers to talk to you and present to you. So I have Hannibal Hayes from as a forester for the city of Minnetonka, Karen Sumac from the Minnesota Shade Tree Advisory Committee, and Ken Smith is a senior advisor of Evergreen Energy. And we're going to go over there, and they're going to come over here to speak to you.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Madam Chair and board members. My name is Hannibal Hayes, and I'm the city forester for the city of Minnetonka. We're a heavily wooded community of 55,000 residents on the West Metro, and we have been, wrong clicker. Go slow. There we go. We have been preparing for the arrival of emerald ash borer in the city of Minnetonka ever since it was found in 2009 in the city of St. Paul. And what that has, what we did first was we had an inventory done of city-owned property, as well as a survey of the trees along the roadways of Minnetonka. What that does is gives us a sense of how many ash trees we have to manage. And what that also did was give us information about the trees that were structurally unsound, and then those that were in poor health. And so those are the trees that we've been targeting for removal prior to the arrival of emerald ash. And what that also did was identify those trees that were structurally sound and then in good health. Those were the trees that we identified to inject with an insecticide in order to preserve them so that they wouldn't succumb to emerald ash borer. That's about 300 trees throughout the entire city, on city-owned property. And we are still injecting those trees to this day. So the insecticide has been very effective in the trees that we have been preserving. The other thing that we have been doing is supporting our residents mainly through technical assistance. Minnetonka has a well-funded forestry program in which I'm the city forester, and then I have two forestry technicians underneath me. They're full-time. And then we have 4 seasonal employees who work 6 months. And then we also have 2 AMPAC members through the AmeriCorps program. And all of these people have been key in getting the word out to residents, not only about emerald ash borer, but helping them to identify that they have ash trees that are either in poor health or structurally sound, and that are either good candidates to be removed and immediately replaced, or that could potentially be injected in order to preserve them. The city of Minnetonka takes it upon ourselves to remove any infested ash tree along the roadway. That's at no cost to the property owner. We've been doing preemptive removals for a number of years prior to finding emerald ash borer within the city limits in 2019. We also offer some financial assistance, whether that's through grants through Hennepin County, the Minnesota DNR. Otherwise, our community development department has some assistance for residents in order to help them remove trees and then replace them. But mostly we're getting out into the community, making people aware of the situation in the city, but then also educating them about what's going on in their property. We are also beginning to, or we have started to transition our ash trees by replanting. We're replanting a wide variety of different species of trees to increase the biodiversity of the urban and community forest. That way, it helps to buffer against the effects of emerald ash borer by increasing the resiliency, but also in some ways the resistance to the impacts of ash or of emerald ash borer. The fewer ash trees that we have to lose, the less of the impact to the urban and community forest. We're also adhering to the principles of what's called assisted migration. What that is moving tree species that are found to the south of Minnesota and planting those north, such as American sycamore. That's a tree that's found just to the south in Iowa, but is not native necessarily to Minnesota. We're also moving genetic stock north as well. So trees that are found in Minnesota, such as silver maple, cottonwood, and bur oak trees, we're actually buying from the Minnesota DNR and then moving those trees up because they're more tolerant to those warmer climates to the south of us. And then we have our annual city tree and shrub sale, of which we have been increasing the numbers up to about 900 was the sale count this year. That is in collaboration with Tree Trust. And that has been a very successful sale. We've been alternating between the species of trees, listening to what residents want and offering those at a discounted rate. Okay. And then what we've found ourselves doing is managing what is typically referred to as the wall wood. This should actually say the walls of wood, because we're losing so many trees. We're now in our fifth year, of infestation. Our wood waste drop-off site at our public works facility is no longer filling up 3 or 4 times a year. It's now filling up 5, 6, even 7 times a year. And then the size of that pile is also growing every time that we have to have it ground. And that's from city removals, either our tree crews removing those trees or the contractors that we hire. Residents can bring in material as well. But unfortunately, as of this past June, we had to close it down to commercial tree care companies because the city could no longer afford to grind as much as we have been. So this led to a very unique opportunity. And in 2021, we implemented what we're calling the Urban Wood Utilization Program. And this was a program that we came up with in order to try to utilize this natural resource that is coming into the public works facility. And that's a way to try to reduce the operational costs, to grind this pile over and over, and to generate some sort of revenue. And the program was kicked off in 2021 with the purchase of a portable swing blade sawmill. This type of mill specializes in smaller dimensional lumber, so 1x4s, 2x6s, all the way up to a 10-inch by 10-inch beam. And we've been selling some of this lumber. We've been incorporating it slowly but surely into city projects. There's all kinds of planning difficulties when dealing with raw material, such as raw lumber, and getting it all the way to a finished product in a project. But we have been selling some of the lumber. We've started to actually produce and sell live edge slab wood, but we also sell a large volume of logs that come into our yard space. There's been a startup company called Storm Trees in Eden Prairie, who's buys the vast majority of our logs, but we still have a whole host of ash logs that we end up just having to grind. We're also engaging as many people as we can, such as being a part of the urban or the wood waste stakeholders group through the MPCA. We're also part of a local chapter of a nonprofit, but then also a U.S. Forest Service wood group as well. And we're also working with Valerie McClanahan, who you just heard from, to host a sawmill workshop next year to promote all the different types of sawmills and to expose the community to those types of sawmills so that they can see what else is possible as well. And then we've been reaching out to residents. They love to see the utilization efforts and encourage us, which is always nice to hear. And then we're out in the community doing presentations such as today. And then one of the most exciting parts is we've started to collaborate with other cities. The city of Woodbury and the city of Bloomington forestry personnel have all brought logs over to our facility. We've milled those together, And now they're looking to incorporate those back into projects in the that they're working on, which has been a lot of fun. And then we've provided trees for the University of Minnesota's fungal lab to test out some native funguses at higher concentrations in ash trees to see what the effects are on emerald ash borer. And we've also worked with 2 capstone groups from the U of M, one to identify schools that we can work with to replace their lost canopy due to emerald ash borer, but then also another group performed a review of our wood utilization. That's all I have. Thank you for your time.
You guys are busy over there.
Try to stay busy.
Okay, well, hello. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, board members, for having me today. Don't know, but patience is not my virtue. I need a headphone. Oh, it really is patience. You're really not kidding. Okay, my Italian self will settle down. Thank you for having me today. My name is Karen Zumak. I work in my day job as the Director of Community Forestry for a nonprofit called Tree Trust based in St. Paul. In my volunteer time, I walk around, drive around, and talk to anybody that will listen about emerald ash borer on behalf of the Minnesota Shade Tree Advisory Committee. The Minnesota Shade Tree Advisory Committee is a federally mandated committee that is tasked with advising the Department of Natural Resources on issues regarding the state's urban and community forestry programs. Our mission, and one that I hold very, very dear to my heart, is to be the leading advocate for Minnesota's community forests and to empower and educate Minnesota's residents to maximize the coverage, health, quality, function, and future of our community forests. So we've been here before. MnSTAC has been here speaking to you, the EQB, almost 10 years ago, September 17th, 2014. It looks like we were here talking with you all about emerald ash borer and how Minnesota had the opportunity at that time to do things a little differently. We had lots of opportunity to share our information and talk about how managing for emerald ash borer would be something that we could do differently because of this great thing that we've had here, which is time. We've known about what would be happening with emerald ash borer since Detroit dealt with it and the communities to the east of us. There were lots of reasons why we're still here. My hair's a little grayer. I noticed a few people here's hair is a little grayer since we started doing this, but I'd say we've ultimately been successful, but in the beginning we're quite unsuccessful, especially understanding the urgency of the issue. One of the reasons I'd say is because of our inexperience and misunderstanding of the inner workings of state government, but we've gotten a lot better since we started. So I just wanted to take a moment and step back just for everyone to understand the magnitude and the gravity of the loss of these trees. Those agency presenters have showed that Minnesota is the home of the largest population of ash trees anywhere in the nation. And while these efforts, anywhere in the nation, and as such, we have the most to lose. Many of you may recall the last time we lost a significant amount of trees due to Dutch elm disease back in the 70s. At that time, the legislature had passed a bill and signed into law allocating $26 million for 2 years to address those issues. And adjusted for inflation, according to the Minneapolis Fed, that would be an investment of $125 million in today's money. And that was just for Dutch elm disease. So thinking about what we're looking at here today with emerald ash borer, a much bigger and more widespread issue, there is a lot more to do. Because the Environmental Quality Board is related to all things climate change and environmentally important, I thought it would be just a good level set for everyone to understand the benefits of urban trees and some research from the Forest Service that's showing that an urban tree can sequester 4 times more carbon than a tree in a forested stand because of that ability to grow faster, capture light quicker. Those trees are doing amazing things for all of us in the communities where we live. And keeping them on the landscape, as Tim had mentioned, is definitely of utmost priority. This is from one of our presentations many years ago. This is the CZO report from 2017 showing that steep reduction in greenhouse gases would be necessary to meet the 2030 goals of our state. When we think about losing millions of trees to emerald ash borer, we have to think about ways that we can keep that carbon in place as long as we can. This again is from CZO talking about back in 2017 how important it is to support funding for urban and community forestry specific to emerald ash borer. As I said, emerald ash borer is a predictable natural disaster. It has significant implications on water quality, air quality, human health, property values, and climate change. Minnesota has well over 1 billion ash trees in forest land and urban landscapes, which will be lost by EAB if no incredible action is taken to protect them. It not only threatens our natural resources, but also our economy, our way of life, and our resiliency against climate change. So I just wanted to kind of touch back on the things that the EAB report and stakeholder information had kind of put forward as those options, those things that we needed to really target. Slowing the spread was the big one, and we have done, the agencies have done a great effort at slowing the spread by not moving firewood. That's been the big message, don't move firewood, and we understand how important that is. That message of keeping those trees in place through preservation and actually reducing those beetle populations is a way to really slow the spread because you're actually killing the beetles that are causing the problem. So we know that over a decade of research that to truly slow that population growth combined in the effort in management is required to actually reduce that population, not just limit the beetles' geography. This is from a campaign that was created through funding we received as a partnership with MnSTAC, the U.S. Climate Alliance, and the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, where we are looking at the viability of using carbon credits to incentivize the treatment and preservation of ash trees on the landscape. Well, it turned out that it wasn't necessarily financially viable, but we did come out with a really great outreach campaign that you may have seen already in any of your social media feeds because it has been a pretty widespread program as we're trying to get that word out about, especially in those areas outside of the metro area where perhaps the leading edge of emerald ash borer is. There is still time to keep those trees on the landscape, keep them out of the landfills, keep them out of those burn pits, so we can actually allow for that transition orderly away from ash. And if anyone would like to see this campaign, I'd be happy to share it. The next one was around supporting communities. That sustained funding is the most important, and I know it's budget season. If it hasn't passed already, just thinking about that sustained funding. There has been that influx of that $26 million. Since 2015, we've been advocating for $13 million a year for 20 years to manage EAB. That's the scope of the problem. So right now we're at about 10%. We do have quite a ways to go if we want to manage EAB in a way that can reduce those environmental impacts. We need that technical support, as Valerie was talking about, the great work that MTA has done with outreach and getting that front edge delineated, replanting trees, removing those standing dead potato chips, increasing that treatment accessibility and incentivizing that treatment. If we can keep the trees in the landscape and we don't have to find ways to dispose of them, it's going to be better for all of us. In addition, increasing those opportunities for wood disposal and, of course, that next highest best use of wood utilization. We have opportunities to do things better. There are plenty of states that have figured out ways to really be engaging with that urban wood utilization. We don't have to reinvent the wheel, and I hope that there's a pretty significant investment in keeping those trees, using that wood, whether that's for sound walls, for park benches, for trail signs. There's ways that we can keep that carbon sequestered. And then as an advisory committee focused on those urban and community forests, our influence is limited when it comes to that transition of ash trees in northern Minnesota or where those black ash swamps are. But we know that if we can actively manage EAB where it is, we can keep it out of where it isn't. Nothing frightens me more than when I was in the Chippewa forest and saw the different treatments they were doing, preparing for emerald ash borer and seeing what the future could hold for us if we lose all of those trees to emerald ash borer. We need to continue to buy that time for the research to catch up, and time costs money, and it's important. And then lastly, managing those ash wood materials, encouraging and incentivizing urban wood utilization. I was in Winona many years ago, planting trees with volunteers next to what they called the community burn pit. And I said, "What's going on there?" And they said, "Well, we're just managing all of our wood." And they were just had a fire going, burning those ash logs over time. And that was really heartbreaking for me to see, but understanding that we need to really boost up that program for communities across the state. Then lastly, just thinking about kind of looking at this in the rearview mirror to some degree, because as I said, my hair has gotten a lot grayer, but I feel like I've learned a lot along the way. And that prioritization for ongoing and sustained funding is important. Emerald ash borer is not the last pest that will come through here and devastate our urban and community forests. So making sure that we're prepared for the next one. Continuing that invasive species detection and outreach, wood utilization, and then let's just think about those the last past missteps, which I learned very quickly was that emerald ash borer was made for an organization like the EQB. It's a many agency issue, and one of the things that I think really stifled the progress in the beginning was this process associated with the legislature and policy around who gets to kind of be in charge of these invasive pests when they first come. So first it's the MDA, and then as it becomes more established, it gets transferred over to the DNR. How can we close that bottleneck? Because we can't ask the MDA to shoulder a many multi-million-dollar program in the beginning when they are a division that has arguably one of the smallest agency budgets. That was something that I saw that was just staggering and something that we need to figure out how to do better in the future. And with that, thank you for your time. Off to Ken.
So while my slide deck is loading, I'm Ken Smith. I'm with Evergreen Energy, currently CEO of District Energy St. Paul. And we have underneath that St. Paul Cogeneration and Environmental Wood Supply. And we are in the management of the wood waste, turning it into something useful, and have been doing that a long time. So talk first about environmental wood supply. Basically, when wood waste comes in, there's a wood yard. I'll show you a location of it. That material is coming in the form of mulch. It's coming in the form of chips, and some is coming in as brush and logs, and that gets turned into a biofuel that is then used in a combined heat and power plant. So all the sources that you can think of wood waste, whether it's tree trimmings, door damage, Christmas trees, but really right now it is EAB, and it's EAB all day long. Although I saw one of the slides said about oak wilt, we are seeing an increase in the amount of oak wilt coming in as well, particularly out of county. There's had a lot of oak wilt in that area. And then St. Paul Cogeneration is a combined heat and power plant, biomass fueled. It has been operational since 2003. A little hard to see the picture on the left-hand side, but that's actually President Bush who came to St. Paul right after he first got elected because of what we were going to be doing, and that was putting a plant in place that would use a waste stream that had been a problem during Dutch elm disease. And it was a way to manage wood waste in the metro area, make energy out of it, both electricity that is sold to Xcel and heat that is then used to heat downtown St. Paul, about 33 million square feet of building space that we heat, and it's approximately 50% of that heating is from wood waste. It used to be primarily coal and then natural gas secondarily. A lot of information on here, but there's three main areas that the wood waste is coming from. The largest by volume is just urban forestry management, and that is almost all of it today. So that's coming from, like I said, tree trimmings or dealing with at the city level, municipal level, and so forth. And that goes into different areas. It goes into wood yards that are, as you've heard, in municipal level. There's also private wood yards, and that material gets ground up there, and a lot of it ends up with us. There's also raw brush and logs that makes its way to us, but we are really not taking that material other than from the city of St. Paul currently because we just don't have space. There's so much material coming in. I'll give you an idea of how we've had to close to that kind of material here in the past couple of years. The next area is land clearing. So as work is being done, housing developments and so forth, trees come down. That's smaller, much smaller now than it was before. And the third area, we've done partnership with DNR on land restoration, invasive species. We do get pallets, for example. We can utilize dimensional lumber. That is a very, very small. It's less than 1% of our overall energy or wood waste that comes in. You'll see an X up there. That is we are not taking brush and logs currently, other than the city of St. Paul, which we operate on their land. And so we have to take that material. There's then at Pig's Eye Wood Yard, it's processed into biomass fuel and then goes to St. Paul cogeneration where it is utilized to produce electricity. This is the wood yard. The Pig's Eye Wood Yard is actually on city land. It's a city wood yard that we have been operating since 2003. It is just north of the Metro wastewater treatment plant along the Mississippi River. You'll see kind of an area around it that's parkland. This is parkland, actually. It's also contaminated land. And I'll show you an image a little bit later on of how big this area was during Dutch elm disease. So this wood yard has been utilized to manage tree waste in St. Paul, but in the metro area since Dutch elm disease. That's what it looks like. That's the kind of stuff that we deal with when it comes in as brush and logs. Sometimes there are logs and things that could be utilized, but generally it's coming into us that it's all mangled together. And then it gets ground into basically mulch and chips, and that's utilized for fuel in the boiler. So some factoids. Prior to 2022, we only closed this wood yard due to floods because it is in the floodplain. When Shepherd Road and so forth gets closed, we end up having the roads get closed off to us as part of the flood protection measures for the Metropolitan Wastewater Treatment Plant. So prior to 2022, we hadn't closed except during flooding. In 22, we closed for 75 days, 23, 128 days, and this year to date, through August, we'll be closed 162 days to brush and logs. We cannot take it. We do not have the space. There is so much material coming in. And in fact, we've been allowing mulch to come in. We're going to have to close next week to mulch through Labor Day because we have no space. It is unreal how much material is coming in, and it has only escalated this year in the past year. It's been escalating really since 2019, but exponential escalation. Current wood waste deliveries to Pig's Eye, we're getting about 70 semis, 100-yard semi trailers per day. We're getting another equivalent of 2 semis of chips that are coming in, and then contractually we're required to take the city of St. Paul's material. We're getting about 300 yards of that. So to give you an idea, we can deliver to the plant in the summertime. We're utilizing about 35 truckloads per day. In the winter, we're operating somewhere around 40 truckloads per day. So it doesn't take much math to see that when we're getting 70 and we can only send out to 35, that we're we're gonna run out of space. That's what's happening. This is the only known picture that I'm aware of. I haven't been able to find anything through the Historic Society or anywhere else. This is of the Pig's Eye Wood Yard site in 1979, 1980. And the highlighted area is where wood waste was stored. And this was stacked, reported. This is, there was studies and things done. And after action, basically, the piles reached 60 feet high. They would have to use cranes to put it on top. Today, we only stacked to 25 feet because of safety concerns. The operators found themselves inundated in acres and acres of elm debris, with more coming faster than they could manage. That's basically where we're getting to here very, very rapidly. The red circle is about the area of our current wood yard. So it was much, much larger than the space we use today. We have talked about utilizing additional space at the city of St. Paul, but it is parkland and there's been resistance. We're handling approximately 250,000 tons of wood waste per year. Recent studies have said that that's about 2/3 of the wood waste in the metro area is coming to us. As you can see, it comes from a variety of sources. The 7-county metro area is where a majority of our material comes from, but we do get material from other counties outside the 7-county metro area. It's because they have no place else to go. And you saw this slide earlier. I'm going to add a little bit on here. There was a yellow line on it indicated that is St. Paul Cogeneration's capacity, roughly 250,000 tons per year. And we are operating and will continue to operate. We have a PUC. Hopefully we'll have a hearing at the PUC on a power purchase agreement with Xcel Energy, that gets extended. We're hoping to be extended to 2031. And then we'll see where we stand at that time. If we are not extended, if that's not approved, we will be shutting down. Cannot operate the plant without it. Can't make the economics work. That, happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Yeah, what? Should we follow up
Yeah.
or just as questions come up? Okay, well, first of all, yeah, thank you so much for coming to the QB day and presenting this. And join them. Yeah,
Great.
great. And bring chairs up. We might have a pretty robust discussion, so maybe plan on not just standing.
There's a couple of there.
There's a couple of corners.
Oh, yeah. Room.
Chair.
Like we should be sitting in them.
Well, again, thanks for all the information that was shared here today. Is there enough? Yeah. All right, good. Good. More than enough now, yes.
Now we have our
Fair
one.
There, in case you have any
Someone
other
wants to
experts who
join.
need to join the discussion. Great. Well, first of all, and again, thank you for sharing that information, but board members, what questions do you have at this point? Board members, go ahead.
Yeah, there's so much material that I don't know how appropriate this question is for the scale that you're dealing with, but I'm curious, and maybe for others at the table, if there's any collaboration with the Lawns to Legumes program in terms of when there is a dead tree, trying to keep it in place as much as possible for pollinator habitat. Okay, Rebecca. But
You mean that the tree could serve as pollinator habitat?
yeah, I guess I'm just wondering if there's ever an opportunity to break down the tree on site and create nesting habitat without having to remove it and repurpose it.
I don't know that is an actual option, because I know that pollinators would need like bare ground and they need like grass, some patches of grass, they need flowering plants. I'm not sure that wood chips would be.
Not necessarily wood chips, but I was reading something from the Xerxes Society about how to reimagine your lawn and how having some piles of wood debris are beneficial for us and for native bees beyond just
Oh, I mean like carpenter bees and like for them to build their nests. Okay.
So I just wondered if that was even something within the same realm right now of discussion to try and keep it on site, less movement, maybe less overall processing cost and a beneficial purpose.
That's definitely a conversation we could have, but I don't know. if that's happening. But it's an idea.
Sure. Okay.
Go to Valerie and then Hannibal. Yeah.
We have, sometimes the aesthetic component can be tough for residents, leaving a, especially, we can't leave the entire dead tree
Sure.
usually because of the safety concerns. But you can leave a spar, is what we call it, where you're leaving a chunk of the stem available. That has been, that can be helpful for wildlife habitat or things like that, depending. Some cities have not allowed for that to take place because essentially, because Emerald Ash Borer is in the tree and it can, it has.
Grow in their life cycle there.
Yeah, I mean, the goal at different points in time has been to remove and maybe not eradicate, but essentially not to leave habitat standing for EAB specifically. But.
So we will, in the city of Minnetonka, we will leave spars specifically for wildlife habitat. But one thing that we have to take into consideration is if that spar was to fall over, how big of a risk would it pose to the general public? So we're leaving these in restored wildlife areas, or we can leave a 10-foot spar about 15 feet away from a trail. And that we have had issues with or complaints with about aesthetics. But when we explain to them that it's for wildlife habitat and things of that nature, then people seem to really like the idea. We have had residents cut down almost an entire ash tree and then just strip the bark off of it. That would be something that that they could do as well to remove the threat of emerald ash borer from that too. But that's a lot of work.
Yeah, and I just also wonder, like, for the amount, like, depending on how big the tree is and like how much actual wood and the logistics of that, I just feel like that adds complications, unnecessarily complications for the homeowner or for like a park.
Okay, thanks.
Go ahead, Peterson.
Karen, what was the dollar amounts again? I've heard them before, but you said the dollar amounts were doing like a tenth of.
So we had originally, when we started doing this advocacy on behalf of Emerald Ash Borer and trying to manage it at essentially a net economic positive with the preservation of trees on the landscape, we were asking for $13 million for 20 years. So that would be $260 million, which is that 10% of what has been allocated thus far in the legislature.
And then, okay. Then my other question, I'm trying to figure this out, but I always think it's interesting. I've had conversations with Ken before about when the wood yard's full or where do those trucks go then? I have my theories, and everything, but to any of you like Minnetonka, because there's no regulation. So a tree company comes, they take down the tree, and then they, take it to District Energy or something. Or there are other things like, I mean, I've had even on my farm, and I always wonder when it becomes firewood, because then they'll say, do you want a load of chips, like, sure, I'll take a couple of chips, or firewood, and so then when does it become firewood, even though there's no cost to it? And I know, that happens too, but I'm just curious, as we figure this out. And then I also think about it as outstate, because we're talking a lot about the metro area, because there's a lot of smaller cities that have a lot, I forget which, there's a couple of cities that have very heavy elm trees, and it's, or not elm, I'm old, but ash. I remember elm trees, that's why. But, just thinking about the cost of it is so like to a homeowner and others, and there's just not. But I'm just curious, like where, if like where, I've talked to you about this before, like where does it go then? Or what do they do with the waste? And then is there any, regulation on that? Or I remember open pit burns too. We had one in Watertown where it was just, it just burned forever, so.
So on the burning Pig's Eye, that site I showed you, that's burned.
Yeah.
How that was.
It was burned,
Yeah, it burned for months and months.
Yeah, yeah.
We used to have an employee who worked there when that was occurring. He said the fire department showed up with a hose and just let it run to try to keep it from spreading anywhere else because it's just it was so much. Generally what happens is there's so many companies that bring us in the large trucks. And so we'll just let them know this is where we're at. You're in constant contact with them. And so it will get held in areas until we can reopen or it goes someplace else. It's, we're hearing, like, we heard from Minnetonka, Ramsey County and others, they've just stopped like commercial haulers being able to dump in areas because everything is full. So they'll hold it until we can take it or dispose of it someplace else. Generally, that's what's been happening. And we'll reopen and we can go again.
It seems
Right
like
now-
you're getting more and more full though. I don't know.
Yeah,
how many
we're,
this week, but
yeah, we are, it's 162 days. We're not taking brush and logs. And right now I'm of the opinion I don't want any brush and logs because it takes so much more space. And if I can just take the mulch,
Yeah.
do brush and log someplace else. So a really big problem. So there's problems all over this, right? Treating and the communities and how you're going to replant. And I swear you drive around Fridley, you drive around Northeast Minneapolis, there's dead ash trees everywhere. And there are neighborhoods, what I've told my kids, do not walk in this neighborhood because these trees can blow, they can break apart. So you've got that issue, but space of where we're going to put wood waste is a real significant issue, and it is going to hit us very hard in the very near future. As all the things we've been able to do before to manage it are not working anymore.
From the regulatory perspective, so we don't regulate what they do with it, but you can't remove it from an infested area, technically speaking, which is pretty much all of southern Minnesota from the southwest corner up through St. Cloud to Duluth, and then everything to the south and east around across the rest of the country. So that's the rule, is you can't move it to an uninfested area.
Right.
We have a lot of success, the more established, the more formal the industries we work with, we're able to enforce that pretty well. But the less formal, to kind of fly by night tree care, whoever they're hard to communicate with, hard to regulate. So that's a pretty difficult problem too.
one more question. I know a lot of you are involved in like national efforts on this too. Or is there anything that you see nationally that other states are doing or that we're not doing or that we could be doing, or if we had money, or is there anything else besides, what we're doing? I mean, I'm not aware of anything following it, but I'm just curious if there's, as we kind of think about, not to feel like it's hopeless sometimes, but it's kind of hopeless. So as we see like it's really spread around the state, I sign the meetings all the time and I'm just like, oh, it seems like we've had a lot here lately. I know that we've tried to control the firewood and I think we've done a good job on that. It's gotten way better. I don't have angry calls anymore about people mad about that. It seems like people understand that, but I don't know if there's any other thoughts or ideas besides money, for treatments or whatever else that we're not doing that maybe somebody else is.
I would also, I think it's important to note that compared to Dutch elm disease, this isn't Dutch elm disease, much worse. I am not an expert in this area. Mark is an expert in this area, but the sheer volume and how this spreads is very different than when we were dealing with Dutch elm disease.
I know you kind of said besides money, but money is definitely needed. I mean, there's the infrastructure, as we were just talking about, in terms of waste management, at least that little piece that is kind of in the area where John and I work is really in a difficult spot, right? We're already straining the existing systems we have. We've made relatively minimal investments in building up more infrastructure or plan Bs, and Ken showed you the chart with how critical his facility is. And, it's potentially vulnerable as early as 2025, right? So what does that system look like if we don't have that? We're very concerned about a lot of open burning, and the types of markets we'd like to develop are going to take time and resources to get there. So that's, I think, a need that we have. We are seeing, maybe biochar is one kind of emerging industry or trend that I know we really hope to build up in the state. And we've got a long way to go. There's a lot of folks. There's a very active and engaged community working in that arena, but very little active actual biochar production in the state as of yet.
I feel like it's always 5 years away, or
Yeah.
always biochar. But no, but I'm an optimist, but I do feel like that is, thanks for mentioning that, because I do think that's something that, we've looked at too, is like trying to ramp that up too and everything. That's a good.
The one thing I would add too is, there's still a lot to do, of course, right? But we have been able to do a lot. And I think when you mentioned hopeless, it's like, no, I recently received a card from somebody who had benefited from the funding. It's been some of the federal funding that we've been able to get ahead of time. That they had a sandy ditch tree in their yard. It was going to cost them what they had been quoted was something like $6,000. They were on a fixed income, not something that they would have been able to afford otherwise. And the programs, the communities that we've been able to support have been able to support these things. And there's so much, I thought I was going to have to move, right? Like those kind of getting that card. And it was like one of those things where having a hard day. Like that's the one on my on my desk that kind of keeps me rolling. So we're having a lot of impact, even in these kind of just maybe that's a small scale, that one person, but such a big impact to them being able to keep their home, being able to stay in it and not be displaced because of these costs. It's a huge thing.
Yeah, it's crazy when you see people that, this average family getting $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 estimates for tree.
Or more.
Or
Or
more.
Oh, yeah.
I think too, we talked about how we've kind of under-resourced protecting the trees we have, right? And
Yeah.
talked about Oakville, we talked about the need for tree pruning and all these other costs. And, I think sometimes then we're not acknowledging the costs of when we remove those trees, when we have to manage those trees, when we might have, wood smoke issues because we burned wood waste that came from trees we took down. And so, if there's a way to focus our conversation more on, investing in the assets we already have and the value of the trees that are out there and preserving those, taking good care of those, I think that pays for itself 10 times over.
So in regards to wood utilization, so acquiring logs from these trees that are being removed. The city of Milwaukee has been working successfully with a local logging company where they provide dumpsters for the city to actually stuff a whole tree into, and then this company comes and picks it up and sorts that material. The city of Nashville is doing some exciting things. They're still working on permitting for a full reuse site that would include wood utilization, but also biochar. The city of Baltimore has done some fantastic things with reclaiming wood that is actually being salvaged from homes that are abandoned and being repurposed. The wood is being repurposed. And then the state of Virginia is actually one of the biggest leaders statewide in wood utilization campaigning and programming. That was mentioned about money. That's always good, but also just coordination of efforts through the state agencies, federal agencies, but then local communities as well. In order for a robust wood utilization campaign, you need the wood, you need the production, so to produce it into a usable material, then you have got to have that market available. And you, unfortunately, the best as I can see, you have to have all three of them at the same time. They can be the same level, but if you want to scale up on utilization of the material that's coming in, you have to scale everything else up, because you can have acres and acres of wood that you can't process, and then you can have the market in any kind of confusing conglomerate of that.
You for addressing that, Hannibal, because that was the question in my mind, is how much of what comes in might still be usable that wouldn't have to be burned in a closed site or chopped up as mulch, but actually used for some sort of forestry products. And if a tree has been recently infested, but it's removed, is there a possibility there to to do some harvesting for forest products.
Yeah, absolutely. As far as a percentage or tonnage or yards of material that could be utilized, that I don't unfortunately know. It's very difficult to calculate. But any log that comes in that's over 5 feet in length and 12 inches in diameter or bigger, there are markets for it. They're hard to find based on species. Green ash, it's actually hard to sell a log right now because there's so many of them. Local sawyers can actually just contact a tree care company and get that log for free, let alone buy it from, instead of buying it from a city. But any ash log that comes in can be milled into usable lumber. Any infected oak log with oak wilt disease or anything like that, any elm tree that comes in with Dutch elm disease and any and all things, all of that can be milled. And some of those insects and diseases actually add a lot of interest for woodworkers to it as well.
There's,
Go ahead, Valerie.
where we conduct urban forest inventory analysis, which is part like an offshoot of our standard traditional forest inventory analysis. One of the things that we're doing with that include all of the same things, other things, but one of those things is looking at actual like clear wood, what is usable for lumber and milling and things like that. So we're able to pull those cords. We're on a 5-year cycle. We just kind of wrapped up our first 5 years, but it'll be an ongoing. I think that's one of the things that has the potential to add value to the wood utilization space is I think, yeah, you can be in production, but do you have a consistent product to be pulling? And this should, because we're on this 5-year cycle ongoing, every year we're taking more data. The goal is that we'll have an understanding of what's naturally coming out of these urban spaces so that maybe better markets can be built.
There's one thing on urban trees that are a challenge, and we see this all the time, is there's a lot of metal, there's fence posts, there's all kinds of things in this material. So not great for sawmills when you run into that. It's not great for grinders, and it's pretty common. Lots of nails, fence posts, you name it. So there's a lot of metal that tends to be in urban.
Board members, questions? Let's see. Board member Nelson, go ahead.
Two questions, and I think they're rather quick. But for Commissioner Peterson and Commissioner Stroman, this issue that Karen brought up about agency capacity and changing roles, are we in a better place now because we've built some capacity for the next similar issues that come along, or is there anything to do along the line? My second question is, what's EQB's role here?
I can respond for DNR. I mean, yes, I think we are in a better place in terms of capacity. I think long term, the question is how many issues are we dealing with at one time, right? So, and I think, I'll share Valerie's optimism, partly because while the legislature's focus may have shifted a little bit from like EAB grants, they've certainly been giving community tree grants, right, as a climate strategy. And so they address not only the ash and EAB prevention and treatment, but broadly understanding, right, the importance of an urban tree canopy. And Commissioner Peterson, that's not just in the Twin Cities, but thinking about urban tree canopies and what community trees mean in communities all across Minnesota. So that's really what Val and her colleagues in our forestry division manage. So I think that interest is still there. Like the focus has shifted a little bit, and maybe in some respect it's broadened. I view it as a good thing because I think the understanding of why that community tree canopy is important is front and center for folks. And so that includes concern over EAB, but it also includes concerns over whatever diseases we might have or whatever threats we might have to urban and community trees. So yeah, I think as an agency, our capacity is growing, and I think the legislature has matured in terms of their appreciation for the importance of this resource and the relationship of that resource to the state's climate strategy, and the recognition that it's actually a pretty economical way and pretty popular, right? Because who wouldn't want trees in their community way to address climate? So a couple thoughts that I would share.
Okay. And then real quick, I'd just say, and we have different committees, and I would say the agriculture committee has not been interested in like funding some of the work that we've wanted to do the last few years. And so that's been, it's been tough to, try to work on that. And it's things that I think we would have liked to have done that we've had a hard time moving on. So it's like, appreciate, we work on what we work on. I don't know if you want to add anything, Mark, because, there's a lot of things that we think we can do, but it's, we've been able to do what we can do, but I don't know if you want to add anything.
I think, like I kind of mentioned at the beginning, AG's role is important, but it's also just a small part of it in terms of like, it's not, we were never going to be like leading everything. So right from the beginning, DNR, PCA, we kind of each had our roles that we're each, filling a part of that. And I think that's, that's something that was never a problem in terms of like working collaboratively on the issue. It was just, I think, how do you get the resources and bring them into the problem that was the, more of the stumbling block.
And then, remember Nelson, the second part of your question about what's EQB's role. I mean, I think that's something we can all talk about. I know I've got, as Rebecca and I have talked about it, I think it was something that hadn't, folks were doing their work. And then after a lot of stuff at the legislature, these folks kind of came to us and said, can you help convene us again and help us meet together? That's my understanding, kind of how we ended up here to get that, to what Mark was just saying about that, like the phases, right? You pass things off, and to help play that role of keeping things kind of aligned. I mean, I think that's a lot of what we talked about in this space in our strategic plan is how can we help program alignment. I was really struck by what Karen was saying earlier about the inner workings of state government and people learning about that, and found myself wondering, like, what role could we play in helping support the public and local communities, like knowing more about that. There's been discussions coming out with other state plans in terms of when we talk about what the state can do versus what the state needs to encourage and sort of support others in doing. I'm wondering, and I will admit I haven't read the 2019 report in detail, but I don't know what was in there about how we could support local communities. And maybe as we think about updating the actions, which I know was one of the things on Rebecca's slides, could we think more about how we put in more things, like more actions, more ways to support local communities, or to make some of these things happen that need a lot of different pieces moving at the same time. And I know, you'll notice Rebecca's so excited about this. She matched her earrings to the Beatles, so.
Thank you. I use this for Emerald Ash Borer. This is not a Miller Ash Borer.
I think we are about out of time, but there's, one more question. Go ahead.
Oh, sure. So I was curious, Ken talked a lot about how key St. Paul Cogen is to managing this big volume of wood waste that's in the metro. And that's kind of a unique facility because it's got like low cost fuel and it's able to sell heat and electricity. And so it makes me curious about the rest of the state, whether the state has done any kind of mapping of like, here's the real hot spots where we expect there to be a huge volume of waste, 5 years from now and 10 years from now. And how does that map to the remaining, these even small like thermal power plants are going away. They're not, so how do we keep that resource and pair it maybe with wood processing? Like, is the state kind of looking forward to outside the metro where you could create the same kind of sort of solution?
To a limited extent, that's one of the things we've got John working on, is trying to get some kind of wood waste generation data. It's admittedly a very challenging problem, and the For example, wood chips may flow into a compost facility, sit there, some might be integrated in the compost and then later end up at Ken's facility. But we do have some limited biomass around the state. We're looking at bringing some more capacity online, hopefully in the next couple of years here. And really just trying to engage with our local government partners to kind of get a sense of what their needs are, what their opportunities are, making sure they're aware of and thinking about this issue. That's a big reason we pushed those wood waste management plans right now with the Metro. But I think that a next phase is likely to be engaged in Greater Minnesota on the same issue because we know that it's going to have that same impact, but with a different set of challenges, a different set of issues.
We're going to need to wrap this. One more. Okay, one more. Remember him.
In terms of who is owning this issue and coordinating it, that came up, I think, early on in the presentations. And for what EQB's role could be, I'm wondering for the portion of wood that's intended to be used for some beneficial purpose. So I have a quick question on what percentage of the wood waste right now is going to a beneficial purpose? And then two, is there anyone actually coordinating that between all of the agencies for where there are existing opportunities for these beneficial uses that could meet a state need and have coordination around it? Is that happening, or is that something that would be helpful for an entity to provide strategy and direction on?
As far as where wood waste is going, it does go to things like compost or mulch. That's a seasonal thing. So that's challenge. But as far as who's coordinating this, I don't know.
Again, I would kind of say I think we're at the phase where we're really just trying to get a sense of the picture. We're still trying to look at the data, figure out where it is, where it's flowing, and from that standpoint, and kind of circling back to the earlier question about like what's EQB's role, I think it's really helpful that EQB can be a forum to at least help the different executive agencies coordinate, collaborate, communicate on a regular basis. All of us get pulled in very different directions. And so having Rebecca make sure that our calendars every month or two have a check-in, have us discuss this, talk about where there's overlap, help us navigate. I talked about the importance for us of preventing wood waste by preserving trees. Well, that's maybe more of a DNR function in a lot of ways, but having that collaboration and coordination there presents us there. And I think our hope is that with John's position, we'll get a better handle on where wood waste is being generated, how much we're managing, and maybe be better equipped to answer that kind of question in terms of X percent is going to mulch, X percent we're capturing for wood products, X percent is biochar, X percent is biomass. And I mean, honestly, what percent is getting burned? All of those things are pretty complicated, especially with limited tools for reporting, tracking, measuring.
I had one thing, Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
We should not go by that this is a public safety issue. Further, these trees get very brittle when they're standing, and there's a lot of dead ash trees. Just drive neighborhoods, you see them. Behind homes, they're next to homes, or low-income housing. These things are a public hazard, and I don't hear enough about that. And that concerns me, frankly.
On that note, first of all, I want to thank our interagency EAB team, and thank you for your leadership on it, Rebecca. But thank you all for presenting today and our external partners on this great information shared today. For continuing to work with you as part of our EQB board. So thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
I don't think we could take a break. Take a 5-minute break. Let's come back at 2:45.
Yes. Everybody. We're about to start.
So.
There's a little tiny triangle near the front. You can find it right side. There you go.
It's very close.
Again, very small.
Yeah.
What about?
All right, let's reconvene now. Everyone coming back from break. And next on our agenda, Mark Scrubs, who's the Director of Office of Enterprise Sustainability with the Department of Administration, and he'll present our Office of Enterprise Sustainability report. Thank you for joining us today, Marcus. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Daubenberger. So you're probably wondering why I'm here. We are in an office called the Office of Enterprise Sustainability. We're at the Department of Administration. And one of our requirements in executive order is to annually report to the EQB. And I don't think we've done it in 5 years. So we're just getting caught up here.
Is it 1 report or 5 reports?
It's 5 reports. It's a great question, Dan. Keep them coming. So I'll just, say a couple things. There's a lot of words on this slide. The Office of Enterprise Sustainability was created in 2017, and many of the agencies here were part of that creation in 2016, and the Department of Administration's Office of Continuous Improvement. But we have been engaged in work groups and all kinds of things with many of the people in this room, including Nick and Dan and the folks out in West Central Minnesota, where Ed's from. And so it's been a really great and supportive group to be part of this community in Minnesota, and we're appreciative of it. And so I'll just say, to frame what we do, the Office of Enterprise Sustainability is really a lead by example effort. And so there's about 7 states with lead by example efforts. I think that we're the most comprehensive and coordinated amongst them. And so what you'll see today is hopefully interesting to you. Our office is tasked with a few things, which is coordinating this enterprise-wide effort, so we're all rowing our boat in the same direction, or rowing in the same direction. And then we are also providing technical assistance to agencies. And agencies are tasked with their own responsibilities, so the 23 cabinet level agencies and the Metropolitan Council, which is sometimes a cabinet level agency or not, if they want to be. And they all collaborate with us on their own sustainability plans. And then I'll say, just lastly, there's 5 of us right now in the office, and I think we really they're all doing a great job of connecting with state agencies and doing good work. And we do also hear a lot from local governments, not a lot, but we do. And we do try to provide technical assistance. Here's the best practices that we've seen in our own operations. And so the work that we do is really, it's limited to the state operations. And so what does that mean? We've got about 3,500 buildings, over 1,900 sites. Commissioner Stroman has got half of those. And they're mostly vault toilets. No, that's not real, but there's a lot of them. And so it's really challenging. There's 12,000 on-highway vehicles, and in excess of another 7,000 off-highway vehicles and pieces of equipment that we kind of keep track of. And so we have 6 goals in 6 focus areas, and a shout out to the EQB, because when we started the office, we had a director, Larry Herkey, and then and they lended us staff. The EQB lended staff to the office. So everyone here has been a part of building this. We're on our second revision, our first revision of the goals. The original goals were established in 2016 and 17, and now we're on an updated version of those goals. You can see them here. I won't read them, but you can see where we're focused, which is really truly operational issues. Our fleet, the energy use in our facilities, the water use in our facilities and operations, our GHG emissions resulting from those things, the solid waste that we generate, whom we work with the PCA on a lot, and then also procurement, whom we also work with PCA a lot on. And it really kind of creates a pretty comprehensive picture for agencies to work on. So what's our role? I talked a bit about this, but we provide a comprehensive reporting and tracking framework. this is kind of where we're probably out front amongst the states, is that ours is probably the most coordinated reporting and comprehensive reporting. We also create enterprise level plans. So identifying and tackling enterprise level issues, or at least trying to figure out what the barriers are, and figure out what the opportunities are. We'll be releasing an energy and solid waste plan to our steering team for approval in January. And then we also support agencies in developing their own plans. Some of the agencies, like Commissioner Daubenberger's, are very capable of making their own plans and doing their own work. It's a very big organization, but we have other organizations like the Bureau of Mediation Services with 11 employees. It's quite a different thing. So we're running the gamut here. And then we do quite a bit of implementation. So we're on project teams, particularly around facility energy, retrofits, solid waste work. We just did some great solid waste audits at the Department of Natural Resources State Parks. And then we also are the champions. That's my job. I get to champion it. It's probably the most fun work and laud the great work and try to advocate for resources. So I'll talk a bit about the reporting results. These are all available on sustainability.mn.gov, and you'll see more there. And there's more to come. We're rolling out a new website, and so we're still building it out. So when you land on the homepage, you can see we estimate an avoided cost due to energy conservation measures. And then we also estimate, and it's not shown here, the greenhouse gas emission reduction annually on average, which is over 200,000 metric tons on average. And then you can float into each of the focus areas, and it's an interactive dashboard. And so you'll see the first pane, and you can go into more detail here. But in the area of fleet, so we've got about, what are we up to? 15 million gallons of, and this is the fossil fuel component. So we have a fuel. We take the total amount of fuel and then we prorate out the bio component. So our biofuel blending mandate, diesel, contributes quite a bit to our fuel reduction, things like that. And recently, the Minnesota Department of Ag started a Press 88 campaign. We have all the materials in my inbox, and we're going to work those out to our state fleet soon so we can help people select the right, the E15, and reduce some fossil fuel use there as well. But what we see here is that you've got about 15 million gallons of fuel. It really dipped down and changed. Our operations changed after COVID. And that's really due to Met Council's changing their trip planning of their buses. So about a third of our vehicles are heavy and medium vehicles, but they are 2/3 or 70% of our fuel use. And that's an important thing to measure. In our light fleets, which accounts for about the remaining of the fuel, we've made significant progress by just implementing hybrid vehicles. Honestly, that's been a huge win, and we're at about 3% penetration of electric vehicles. In energy, you'll see we've made significant reductions, about 13% reduction in energy intensity, so energy use per square foot since our baseline. Many agencies have been doing this work dating back for a long time. 2009, there's executive orders in 2011 that direct agencies to do this work. Admin, DOT, some of these big agencies have reduced their energy use by upwards of 15 to 20%. So water use, we're getting used to this. This is a new way for us to think about water. We used to only look at the total amount of water. Now we look at our water intensity. So normally we also track the total water use in also considering the water used in fish hatcheries and at wastewater treatment plants. So you can see that on our website. But when we look at something that's probably a bit more controllable for us from a policy perspective, while those are more policy objectives and this is more operational, we think about this, which you'll see a lot of seasonal variability due to irrigation. And so that's an area where we just had an intern from University of Minnesota MinTap program, and they did some irrigation audits. And so we're hoping to implement those soon. Solid waste, we report on a diversion rate. We're targeting 75% diversion, and you can see where our diversion rate is at today. It changed a bit after COVID, mostly because we don't have people coming into the cafeterias like we used to. But we still look for opportunities where we can advance this work. And so Department of Corrections, for example, did a lot of work a number of years ago in implementing organics collection in their food service, which is tremendous if you think about the barriers and obstacles there. And we have other opportunities at other agencies to do that kind of work too. Okay, so this is the like one that really matters to everybody. So greenhouse gas emissions reduction, we have from a 2005 baseline, because we use the Next Gen Energy Act that you're all probably quite familiar with as our baseline for greenhouse gas emissions. We've reduced our emissions by 38%. Our goal used to be 30% reduction, and we passed that. That was for 2025, we passed that. And we're working towards now a 50% reduction goal by 2030. We'll probably meet it. It's the greening of the grid, essentially, is what's getting us there. We've done the math, and we think that's where we'll end up. And then also changes in operations at Met Council gave us a kind of a boost. But the other thing that I just want to point out is between 2005 and 2017, when we weren't tracking data between those years, there was a lot of space consolidation efforts that happened. And so as the agencies currently are going under space consolidation planning, I expect that we'll see a significant jump down again from that effort. And then one more on GHGs, and then I'll pause for just a second. So you can see kind of by source, and Ken's not here, but the bottom bar is our energy related emissions. It's not just the greening of the grid, although that's been a big driver of it. We also have great partners like District Energy that supply the Capitol Complex, the 28 buildings in the Capitol Complex, with ever increasingly clean power, heat, and cooling. And so that's been an important part of the story, and we can break that out some other day. But the district systems offer us a tremendous opportunity, just like we have, I think off the top of my head, 19 campuses around the state that are correctional facilities, state hospitals, Veterans Affairs, veterans homes, and those facilities, many of them are district systems. And so thinking about how we can decarbonize those systems first is probably where we're going to see our biggest opportunities. I'll just say that we do annual sustainability awards, and these are the winners from this last year. The Department of Military Affairs has really been one of our kind of standout folks for a long time, and many of the things that we do were holdovers from what Commissioner Herkey and Colonel Herkey was doing at Military Affairs and doing now, and that's kind of thinking about more long-term planning and better maintenance and operational planning and things like that. So they are really on top of energy and water and waste, and they've really been a great place for us to have a champion. I'll pause, and I'll check on time.
Getting close on time, but go ahead and take a few more.
Does anyone have a question about that? I'll just stop there. Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No worries. Just one quick question. Is 2005 the baseline for all of the metrics or just greenhouse gas metrics?
Just greenhouse gas, because it aligns with the Next Gen Energy Act. The rest are 2017, or slight adjustment from there to give credit for work that had been already done.
Marcus, in these charts, you can often see COVID really distinctly with like a drop, but then usually a recovery in the bad sense, right, of like energy use or greenhouse gases. But you didn't see that as much in some, like your fleet use, for example, or.
So what happened, we are seeing our light fleet rebound a little bit if you look at the light segment all by itself. But what you really are seeing with energy is we didn't see a dip, right? State facilities. So we looked at this. What ended up happening is, our facilities, whether they have one person or 100 people in them, we had to operate them per ASHRAE standards, which required so many ventilation turnover rates. And so that actually boosted energy in ventilation and heating and cooling because of that. And while we saw maybe reduced energy from lights and plug load, it all kind of balanced out. And so we've seen a lot of people say that they would have expected that, but we didn't see it. And also we're the state government, so we have to keep running. Yes, Commissioner.
I was going to say another piece of that is, and I think it's an apt observation, is some of the state facilities that are very heavy users of energy are 24/7 facilities. So correctional facilities or direct care and treatment, where those buildings were always up and running and fully staffed and had use during COVID and continuing. So those are some of the most intensely used or buildings that use energy, state buildings.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you. Yeah. So I'll say in calendar year 24, we have been prioritizing work around building a culture of sustainability. We've got great reporting. We are doing projects out in the buildings and the fleet, and they're great, but we've been focused on building a culture of sustainability so we can realize how everybody participates in it. So it's been some things that everyone can do. So we've been sending out sustainability related messaging that agencies can use on a monthly basis. And we are happy to report 14 agencies out of the 24 using them, which is tremendous success. We're currently developing a new employee orientation module around sustainability, 5 minutes or less. And then we also have been doing, working with agencies on adopting a sustainable meeting policy, not because it does have an impact on waste, but it is more about helping them understand waste and their choices around transportation. And then we've asked that agency leaders try to support their sustainability teams better. 2025 goals are out on the street, priorities are on the street, and they're around energy and water and capturing the maximum benefit from the Inflation Reduction Act elected pay. So, and I'll say here's just progress on this. We've got great participation from agencies. Honestly, this rate of pickup from very large organizations is slow. So we're doing, I think, pretty great this year. A lot of great agencies collaborating on this. This is a couple months old, so there should be some more on there. And then I'll just pass on that to say that we're working on the new employee orientation and we've been sending out messaging. It's going great. And I think that's all I've got. That's it.
The update and sending the report to us. What questions do board members have?
I don't know how much you might have looked into this, but how much of the emissions reductions, water use reduction could be due to telework or work from home that are still happening, but they're just not in a state building anymore?
Yeah, so board member, this is like an interesting thing, right? Like you're squeezing one side of the balloon and it's coming out the other side. The other side of the balloon's getting bigger. We are aware that that's happening. You can see in our building profiles that there's less toilets being flushed, just to put it, bluntly. But the big drivers of our water use are our 24-hour facilities. Showers take a lot of water. That's real. And operations that are more process oriented, just to be. But our buildings, I think our agencies have done a great job implementing low flow fixtures. This, how do we quantify this, and should we? It's not really within scope 1 or scope 2 emission accounting, so it doesn't fit the standard practice, but we need to think about how to quantify it. That's real. Yeah, of course.
Go ahead, board member.
Kind of just want to give you an opportunity to talk about, can you talk about how Minnesota's B3 buildings benchmarking and beyond is kind of helping you meet your goals?
Yeah, so B3, which is a partnership between Admin, Commerce, the Center for Sustainable Building Research, and then software development group that does the software component of it, is super crucial in that when we are doing a major retrofit or a new building, we're building a building that's on this increasingly decreasing GHG emission slide path. So we're currently building buildings that are 80% more efficient and less emission emitting than before, and we're approaching the 90%. So what's happening as we're in 80% is when buildings come through the design process, they are almost all including ground source heat pumps and solar. And it's not avoidable given the design framework in most cases. And this is huge because it tees them up for an IRA elective pay credit, a tax credit, but it also is really driving. We've seen there was a pre-design for Stillwater Department of Corrections, the correctional facility, and that project, if it were to be funded and implemented, could reduce emissions by 80%. So tremendous, the effect is important for sure.
questions for Marcus? Again, thank you, Marcus, for the update. Thank you for all your work and leadership in the sustainability space for administration.
And I'll promise all of you, we will use the PCA's like green sustainable meetings next stuff packets they have for the next time we have lunch. We'll get it. We'll get on that for the next one.
Thank you, Marcus.
Thank you. Okay, so then next on the agenda, the Environmental Congress update, we have Priscilla Viola. Hello, Priscilla. She's our Communications and Engagement Coordinator. She'll present our update for the Environmental Congress.
Thanks, Jesse. Hi, everyone. I'm Priscilla Viawad. I'm our Communications and Engagement Coordinator. And we'll be providing an update on this year's Environmental Congress, which is a mere 6 weeks away, almost a little less than 6 weeks. I also like to share that today our registration link went live. So it's now on our website, on our social media. We sent a lot of emails to partners today. So it's exciting. It's real. We've got people signed up and excited to join us. So I wanted to just sort of recap and refresh everyone's memory about the 4 topics and locations that we'll all be meeting at. So we're going to kick off the Congress in Brainerd, Minnesota, where we'll be talking about climate resiliency and adaptation in key habitats. And that conversation will be led by Department of Natural Resources and their team. On Tuesday, September 24th, we'll be in St. Cloud talking about developing Minnesota's green economy with Deed and Commerce leading that conversation. And then Wednesday, September 25th, we'll be in St. Paul talking about supporting local actions through the Climate Action Framework, and that conversation will be led by PCA. And then lastly, we'll end the Congress on Thursday, September 26th in Mankato, where we'll be talking about managing water pollution on agricultural lands, and that conversation will be led by the Department of Agriculture. So I also just wanted to give you a sense of the format. So all 4 meetings will have a very similar format. Obviously, we'll be having the conversations around the topics will be different, but the way that we're setting up each meeting is very similar. So we'll start off with small group introductions. So people will be sitting at a table of about 8 to 10 people, including all of you, where people will sort of talk about why they're there, what's important to them, what brings them to the space, and just sort of get grounded in why people are really wanting to come and talk to us about these issues. And then the state agencies that we're working with will have a short 20-minute presentation about the topic that people will then take a deep dive in the next portion of the meeting, which is where there'll be discussions and report backs. So for about 45 minutes, people will have a facilitated conversation at the small tables with questions that we've been working with our state staff on. And then sort of there'll be this report back so that everyone can sort of hear what was discussed, sort of the golden nuggets and ideas that people have about the different topics and areas and work that the state is doing. So it's really an opportunity for people to provide direct feedback to the people who are leading this work and sort of share their insights and perspectives that they have as part of either the organizations, their work, or just people who live in the region and who care about these topics. So board member roles. I know that we have talked with some of you about this already, but for our public board members, we're going to be asking that you all are sort of the co-hosts. So when we first designed the Congress, we sort of planned it around 4 areas in Minnesota where we had public board members who lived near sort of those main areas. And so we're having 2 public board members at each meeting, sort of co-hosting and welcoming people to the space. So very informal, nothing too formal. We'll have maybe a few words that you'll share at the very beginning to just sort of, again, say thank you for coming and welcoming people to the space. And then you'll also be participating in the small group discussions. So mostly listening and just kind of hearing what people have to say about the topics that are being discussed. And then for agency and commissioners, we're asking just again for mostly participation and some closing remarks, thanking people for coming to the meeting. And then lastly is the timeline. So as I mentioned, today is the first day that we had the sign up for registration go live. So that'll be up for 2 weeks. I'd like to share that we already have about 50 people signed up today. So, and that went live this morning. So that's really exciting. So that'll go through the 4th, and then September 9th, we'll be sending out emails with more details, including agendas, how to park, and all of those sort of logistical items. And then September 16th, the online portion of the Congress will go live. So for people who aren't able to join for whatever reason in the in-person meetings, we'll have an opportunity to join on the conversation online through Engagement HQ. We'll have sort of at least one-pagers from state staff with information about each topic. And then the questions that people are discussing in the in-person meetings will also be online. So people can chime in, and also we'll sort of aggregate what's online with what we heard in person for the final report out after the Congress. And so the Congress is September 23rd through 26th. And we still haven't set a date for the report out, but that'll be happening in the months to come after the Congress, where we'll sort of say like what we learned, what we heard, and what actions we can potentially take as in our work. So that is all that I have. I mean, that's a lot. That's a lot, but that's all the updates so far. And then I included our QR code that you can, I mean, you all won't need this, but feel free to take a photo, share it with your people. Yeah, and encourage your neighbors, community organizations that you know and work with to please sign up.
Thank you, Priscilla, for that update. Just to check my understanding, if you go back a couple slides where you have the roles, board members and one more back, that one. So state agency presentations. Would those presentations just be of the state agencies who are leading those? Or every state agency who's planning to attend, who we need to make sure to we're ready to present?
No, so we've been working with state staff from the agencies who are leading the conversations to help them prepare some slides and material that will be shared out. So we're already in contact with them and working with them on the presentations.
And I could add, we wouldn't do. I'll add, Madam Chair, there's a couple of places where there's an agency that maybe isn't speaking, but has some work that's directly aligned. And so we're also checking in with them and sort of saying, do you want the opportunity to provide like a fact sheet that provides some more information? So I think we're chatting with some of the folks at Bowser about providing some information about Bowser's strategies on climate adaptation and resiliency and habitats. I think MDH will also be participating in the one on water pollution and providing some information on what they do. So we're trying to make sure we have the other aligned information in the room too, but we're trying to keep the presentations pretty short. So
sure,
that's the plan.
That's good. Thank you. Other board member questions? Go ahead.
So I'll be co-hosting the Mankato event, and I know Department of Ag is leading that one. But Nancy, since you answered the question, I'm curious if transportation is involved in that at all.
We are planning, I'm planning to be at the one in St. Paul and the one in St. Cloud, I believe.
Okay, I bring that up because since we're talking primarily about the Minnesota River and, you know, there's both sediment and nutrients, there's a 14-mile stretch of the Minnesota River that's used for transport for barge industry. And I wondered if it would be interesting to have that angle presented at that meeting, kind of the cross section of who's affected by some of these issues.
Yeah, sure. So that what we were trying to do with some of these topics too is to scope them around like work that's ongoing, so that like the nuggets of the people's conversations can really phase into or go into something that's really ongoing. So that one's actually going to focus around the nutrient reduction strategy and the scale up of ag BMPs. So that's the more detailed focus on that one. But I would say one of the things that we're hoping is that if this format, if people kind of like it, and that there's like opportunities to then maybe continue to do some meetings like that outside of the ag.
Well, even with ag BMPs being the focus, that still impacts river navigation. And so I don't know. I think it's, and particularly like the large companies that are impacted are ag companies. So having that, I don't know, having that cross section, I just think could maybe accelerate the solution piece if some representatives are at that table.
I think we tried to cast a pretty wide net on people and making sure we're getting the ag groups, but we could talk more about that. I mean, if there's folks that you think that you want us to spread for all of you, again, if there are folks that you think we should call up and say, hey, do you want to come? We'd like to have you in the room for this conversation. We can do that.
Okay.
As a couple of things. One, suggest if you're interested in that group, just contact the Lower Bend Watershed District. They would have contacts for all the shipping folks there, because that's their kind of somewhat their constituency group. But second, I had just a couple of questions. In the statement there in the discussion report, that it says answer a set of questions about the state's work. Is that state's work with a capital S, or is it, the sort of the broader what's going on in Minnesota? I don't know if the public makes a difference. So I'm wondering if you're being intentional.
Yes, I would say state with the capital S. So since we are having state agencies sort of lead the conversation and discuss some of the work that they're doing on some of these issues, we're hoping that the questions that the conversations will be based around are sort of targeted to help get at people's ideas around strategies, implementation, goals, things like that for state agency staff to consider in the work that they're either already doing or planning to do in the near future. If that answers your question.
Yes. And then the second question on the roles. One, I'll be in St. Cloud as well, and you had welcome and so forth as a responsibility for public and opening remarks. So are we going to have opening remarks, or so we prepare something, or?
So we can circle back with you on that. I think it would just be very like sort of informal, inviting, just sort of thanking people for coming to the space, welcoming them. Just a few opening remarks. I know Catherine will also be adding something at the beginning to sort of ground folks and why they're there and why we're inviting people there. But I think it's important to have your voices in the welcome as well as part of our sort of local board members and why you're there to support the work that they're doing.
And should we coordinate a little bit with the other person, or that's part of the circling back?
Yeah. We'll circle back with you on that for sure. Thank you.
Board Member Kessenberger.
And just one question. So this is going to be in a closed space. So there's going to be a certain amount of people that can fit in the closed space. Seems like there's going to be a popular desire for people to go to this. So first question is, what happens if they get overbooked? Are you just going to cut off registrations or whatever? Second question is, if we're all assigned to one of these, but if we wanted to go, as board members wanted to go to multiple of them, can we let you know? Do we sign up in the public forum? Are we not allowed to go? Whatever.
Yeah. So for the first question, you're right. So there is limited space, and that's something that we're very, very intentional about because of the amount of facilitators we have. We want this to be small table conversations, and obviously we can only accommodate a certain amount of people given that format. But that is why we have this online engagement platform for people when we do run out of space for people to be able to join in on the conversation there. And then as Catherine alluded to earlier, I think if this format really works well for people and people are sort of excited about having more small conversations and meetings, then we might consider doing more of these in the future. And then we won't We won't be closing registration early unless we get like wild amount of people who are interested in coming. But we are really prioritizing folks who live within the area, who are working on these issues, and folks who really haven't met with state government officials before. So that's part of the public interest form, and that'll help inform sort of how we go about inviting participants to join. The form is also a public interest form, so it's not an automatic registration, and that's very clear in the form and in the sort of message that people get after they fill it out. And then to your other question about coming to other meetings, I think we can make that work. You wouldn't have to fill out the public interest form, but just let us know if there's other meetings that you're interested in attending, and we can try and figure that out.
Questions?
Really quick, just for the members that, or the participants that have already registered, is there a distribution, like are mostly registering for St. Paul, or do you have kind of widespread at this point?
So it's a little bit mixed all over the place. I think there's a little bit more interest in the St. Paul event, which sort of makes sense. But we were expecting that. But yeah, no, there is a bit of a mix for all four events. Yeah, so that's exciting.
Very exciting that we got a lot of interest right on the first day we opened it. Okay, well, I think we should move on. Thank you, Priscilla, for all your work on this and your continued work until we host the event, and looking forward to those discussions.
Great, thank you.
Right, so then the next item on the agenda is our fiscal 25 work plan, and we're going to have Executive Director Nuschler. Just an update on that, and I am sorry I've crunched your time.
That's okay.
For public comment.
I organized the agenda, I guess. So I knew I was putting myself last and in danger, and I will just bust out the East Coast fast talking and see what we can get through today for the proposed work plan for all of us. Today, talk about our resources, our planned work. Always my little plate picture, because this is all about taking the items off the huge buffet of work and figuring out what we can actually put on our plates. As you've all seen, we kind of go from this big picture out, or big picture in, from the strategic plan that sets our overall aspirations and the ideas of the work we could take on, down to those individual and project plan levels. And so it's really exciting to have the new strategic plan to help us focus on like what items we should be taking on to put on our work plan of what we want to move forward. And then just a reminder of the outcomes and strategies that we approved in the strategic plan last month, which we used to focus the work, and which you'll see all of the items are tagged with which strategy or outcome they support. In talking about the work, I thought it was probably helpful to remind ourselves of the resources that we have to do the work with our annual budget, so our biannual budget. So this was our fiscal 24-25 budget appropriation was about 3.7 million. Most of the increase up from our fiscal 22-23 appropriation was to do the climate calculator work. So we got that chunk of money for that goal. Otherwise, I would say our base budget's more closer to that 2.5 million. And we are 90% funded from the general fund. We also do receive some funds from interagency, from other agencies to support the pollinator work. As you'll see here, the vast majority of our work, our funding pays for salaries. And you could see for fiscal 24-25, the climate project was 16%. Just also, if it's useful to look a little bit at the history of the appropriations over time, kind of going back about 10 years, you see the green is the general fund, the blue is the environmental fund. I probably should have switched those colors. But I think really about fiscal 18, there was a switch to more stable ongoing funding rather than specific project funding. The kind of dark gray bars in the early years were specific silica sand project dollars. That made up a lot of budget. Now we have a little more general. So just if that's helpful context, to fund all of our resources, the executive director plus 9 staff positions, we have 8 currently filled. When I gave this last year, there was only 6, and we were trying to hire a bunch of people, and now they're all here, and it's wonderful. So I'm so glad to have everybody. We do have one assigned position that we're kind of, I'm kind of holding over the long-term need to see like what the work is, what is that position could be used for, and what is our long-term budget sustainability for that additional position. Of course, we work a lot with collaborative work groups. We have the agency tech reps, many of whom are listening in or here. So one from each agency. They are so helpful and we rely on them a lot. The interagency pollinator protection team, groups like the EAB interagency team. We can do proposed teams for specific projects as needed, whether that's water plan or specific environmental review projects. So, you know, we rely a lot on these collaborative work groups and the capacity from our member agencies, and we do try to recognize with that reliance, it's important for us to try to use everybody's time and talents wisely and effectively. And so the work plan does try to delineate the level of support needed, whether it's sort of high, medium, or low, and that we communicate that and our expectations or kind of what we need with folks. So moving on to the actual work plan, the one you have in your packet, we try to talk about the body of work, some details about the project, key timelines, the strategic plan and goal, and then the support needs, as I just mentioned, and whether those are high, medium, or low. So going through in kind of the body of work, starting with environmental review, and I think these were, all of these work plan was heard by ERIS in June. So kind of have been through some of this ER work already. That is, program work is guided by that outcome 3 to maintain and improve the environmental review program, and is really focused around each piece is focused around one or more of these 4 strategies. In addition, the work continues to be informed by those highly ranked program effectiveness improvement suggestions that we went through last year and that came in as part of our environmental review continuous improvement project, and that we last year talked about which ones we wanted to prioritize. So some of those key areas are better data management and data gathering, making sure we're doing greenhouse gas and project life cycle analysis, looking at the decision criteria that are used in environmental review, and then doing guidance, best management practices, and trainings. So the environmental review program work is also kind of tagged with which one of these outcomes it's designed to support. So for, these are presented then going through the different strategies. So under strategy 1, to support RGUs and project proposers, we are proposing guidance updates. There's 4 here. We want to just clean up and better format our existing environmental review guidance. We have a lot of really old PDFs that say things like, you can send this to EQB on a CD-ROM. Well, no, if you did, we wouldn't know how to read it. So we want to get those updated and make them easier to navigate for our everyone who needs them. So that's our first focus, is to just make those web formatted, and that will also help us keep them up to date so that the information doesn't get inaccurate over time. Then we know there's places that we want to expand our guidance, one of which is petition submittal and evaluation guidance. I was just this week looking at some of the review of our historical data that Elizabeth, our student worker for the summer, did. And when you look at what kind of calls do we get, there was a pretty strong evidence that we get a lot of calls with people asking about petitions. What needs to be in my petition? Who's the RGU that's going to get my petition? How are they going to look at my petition? So there's a clear need to talk about, to provide some more guidance to people on petition submittal and evaluation. We also would like to develop guidance or best practices for consideration of tribal cultural resources in EAWs. We would do that, of course, closely following our tribal coordination policy in terms of what is appropriate there, but that is something that we've heard continually that sort of seems to be rising up to the top of the concerns that many of our tribal partners have. So that is on our list as well. And then to review the guidance on alternative urban area-wide reviews and evaluate potential updates. That was also a place where the data shows we got a lot of calls. And then doing some training is on our minds too, make sure people know what's out there and how to get it. And then finally, we do still need to do more work in evaluating what our local governments need around the decision criteria in environmental review and what the decision to order an EIS or not, and around cumulative potential effects. There's a lot of ongoing work on cumulative impacts that we will be tracking and paying attention to and learning. Strategy 2 is all about our climate calculator. It's the inclusion of climate and environmental review is one of our big projects. That climate calculator is due to be complete at the end of fiscal 25. And so in addition to literally just the tool, the work's going to include an associated user manual and guidance on how to use the tool, training for users, and then likely what we will need to do is go back and look at the guidance we have for filling out that portion of the EAW form right now. How does that need to be updated to reflect the calculator? And we also want to look at the climate resiliency guidance, because the calculator is focused on the questions on the form about climate mitigation and climate pollution. But we also have climate resiliency, and we have, I think we have a meeting in the next couple of weeks, thanks to some connections of folks at MnDOT to talk to the U of M about what might be out there with the climate tool and the resiliency tools that they have that we might be able to use. Strategy 3 is our data collection and our ability to gather and use data in a way that we can evaluate program effectiveness. So in fiscal 24, we updated the data management plan, and in fiscal 25, we have multiple projects to improve our data collection going forward, better manage past data, and start to provide better sharing of data and information. So I think we've spoke about this earlier this summer. We do plan to launch a survey to gather key data about environmental review process timelines and engagement. That was originally planned to be a 2-part survey. At this part, probably only going to be a one-time per project survey based on some feedback. We also would like to do a kind of what I would call a customer service survey. So asking people who do environmental review, did you find what you needed on our website by calling us? How did we do as the EQB technical assistance staff? And then we've done some internal data cleanup, kind of that technical assistance data that I was just able to reference, was because we just had the student worker put a whole bunch of it together so that we could look at it and say, well, where are we getting calls? And so we've done that work. There's a little bit more to do because the summer is short, but that was a really awesome project that has helped us to do that. And then Jesse has been working with data folks about how we could do a new data dashboard on the web that would show some of the data. So kind of like Market showed us for the Office of Enterprise Sustainability, it's not a static report, there are dashboards and you can go grab it. That's how we would like things to be. So that is on our work plan for data for this fiscal year as well. The last part of environmental review is evaluating changes to the 4410 rules and program operations and implementing those that are needed. One of our big pieces of work that we have to finish is the mandatory categories report, which you all will hear more about in September and October. And that's part of evaluating the needs for changes to 4410. So there is on the work plan kind of a placeholder for what might come out of that and the recommendations or issues that need to be further evaluated that the team might put forward there. We also will need to do between fiscal 25 and 26 2 rulemakings that were directed by the legislature to update 4410 to conform with changes made to the energy infrastructure permitting rules in statutes 216. And then also a gas and oil production mandatory category rulemaking. There's currently a committee looking at sort of what regulatory framework is needed for gas and oil production that is being led by the DNR that we're participating in, and then we're likely to have rulemaking to come out of that. And then also continuing to evaluate the improvement recommendations from the continuous improvement process. And I do envision that at some point, like later this year or early 2025, once we have the mandatory categories recommendations, Kayla called it, we need to kind of assemble the whole treasure chest of all the ideas that have come out for environmental review and really, really look through them closely. Figure out what's next. After environmental review, we have climate and water work, kind of guided by our outcome 2 in terms of state policy and program development on priority issues. We have some specific strategies there, but the 3 big projects in the climate and water world are on this slide. It seems like one of the through lines that we're hearing for EQB is that we should continue to think about how EQB can serve as a place to gather, compile, and share and discuss data and information that tells the story about how Minnesota is meeting our policy goals in these actions. And so for fiscal 25, we're going to be participating in the revision of the Climate Action Framework to support future reporting. To support future reporting. I think the state is going to be revising the Climate Action Framework, and one of the things that we want to do is to have more emphasis on what the metrics and methods are going to be for ongoing reporting. EQB is also going to be involved in what is called the One Minnesota Climate Goals, and there's going to be a focus in fiscal 25 on industrial decarbonization and the development of the regulatory environment for next generation green industries. And because of the connection to environmental review, we are going to be part of that work as well. And that's part of that. Those One Minnesota Climate Goals are decided on and focused on by the Governor's Climate Subcabinet. And then finally, we'll also be participating organizing and playing our statutory role in compiling our required water assessment and policy report that is due in September of 2025. So we're just getting started on that, reaching out to the state agencies that have water monitoring and water policy responsibilities and convening that group. So you will hear more about that as we get that group together over the next few months to think about how we can make that report, what we should put in that report, which was last done in 2015. So in addition, then we have the next kind of grouping of work that's also guided by that outcome 2 in terms of priority and emerging environmental issues is our work around pollinators and biodiversity. Again, another kind of through line here is one of the things that the interagency pollinator protection team is working on this year is updating scorecards to tell us like how are pollinators doing and how are we doing in completing the work that we need to do to protect pollinators. So the projects under pollinators are the action framework implementation, the annual pollinator report and updated scorecards, which I think you all will see in November, and also doing some engagement through the pollinator public events that I mentioned earlier today. Kind of in this vein of biodiversity and with what we heard earlier today, I think emerald ash borer is clearly one of those issues that I think people are asking us to take a role in convening. So there's sort of a placeholder on the work plan that says, all right, what do the agencies need and how would they like us to play their role in convening and supporting them to help guide, get towards that innovative and aligned policy and program development. And then last, we have a bucket of work around engagement and equity. And in a lot of ways, these strategies are kind of are developmentally oriented, as we talked about when we were doing the strategic plan. They're about rebuilding connections and engagement with key partners, which has been changed due to staff turnover and COVID and just changing the ways we all meet together in the world. And also building out considerations of equity. In terms of this bucket of work, I think some of the things that we need to do to meet those outcomes don't really show up in the work plan as projects. For instance, like as I'm starting to think about the questions to ask the state agencies to scope out the 2025 water assessment report, one of the questions I want to ask them is what's the equity component? As we've said, we want to make sure all of our reports have that, so that's going to be part of the discussion, but it doesn't show up as an individual line of work on the work plan because it's embedded in how we're going to put that water report together. So the specific sort of delineated projects that we put together in this part, convening the Environmental Congress, and as Priscilla and I both alluded to, maybe potentially building on that. There's some specific partnerships we've identified to build connections with groups that work to build capacity among diverse communities to serve on state boards. We want to work with them to support future board recruitment. We want to have more partnership presentations like we had today. I think it was really valuable to hear from people, partners and stakeholders from outside of the state agencies. We want to continue to do that and to find ways to identify which issues it's helpful to hear from people on. And then identifying the current status of understanding disproportionate impacts across these state agencies and what we can learn from that. That was one of the things we discussed in the strategic plan. And that was really fast, but that is my very quick walkthrough. And I am happy to take any questions from anybody.
Thank you, Executive Director Nuschler, for that update. And I should mention too, this is an approval item for today. There is a resolution in your packet for that. So let's start out with board member questions, comments. Commissioner Stroman.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Director Nuschler. Once again, there is so much work in this area, and it's really exciting to see all of the different strategies come to life in this work plan. I do just want to echo the comment that I made last time we did the work plan, which is I do have some concerns about the ambitious nature of the work plan, and just recognizing that, as you pointed out, there are also things that over the course of the legislative session, get directed toward the agency. And so to your point, this does need to be a living document. Just a couple of thoughts that, I assume, but hope we will consider in the execution of the work plan. And one is just there's a lot of work that is ongoing of things that we have started, not yet completed, because they are longer term things. And so, I do think it makes sense to prioritize completion of some of those items before we dive into some of the new ones. And then just to echo the comment I made last time too, that and I know we're not the only agency in this boat with, a certain amount of tech rep capacity. And so, these are, there's sort of time capacity estimates made at this point in time. And I would say as we get closer to implementing some of those items that are going to require capacity from other agencies, and specifically capacity from our tech reps, that as we work, that we work to better define that capacity. And if that is, if we think there is a change in that, particularly an increase in what we think we're going to need, that there's a revisiting of, whether that can really be included in this year, or whether we need to bump it. So I just, again, our tech reps are great folks. They're very professional and capable, and yet, they are not superhuman. And I want to be, and this is not the only aspect of their work. And, if we load up this, we are taking away from other really important things that they do. So I do just want to, I'm fine with the work plan as it's written, but I think it'll be something as we go forward, need to evaluate and make sure that we actually have the capacity to do the things in the work plan that are outlined.
And Commissioner Sturman, I think I didn't put it in here because it's not done yet, but we are working with the tech reps on kind of more of a timeline. Like, when do you think you're going to need us, and trying to lay the things out so that we are kind of, I guess I would say, more like steady asks as opposed to like pouring a bunch of things on them right now. So one of the things I started doing the timeline, I'm like, oh, well, there's a very fuzzy part in the middle, because it's like, once this one's done, then, kind of seeing what comes next, what their capacity is to review things. And so I suspect there would be a lot of sort of timelines, like what is the timeline on when we can all review it, and how that would work. So yes, we're trying to be very mindful of that, because sometimes they do seem superhuman in the number of things, like just their smarts and the things that they bring to us. So I always want to use their talents, but not.
And I just wanted to express, like, as a board member, I am very supportive of us being adaptive. And if there is something where it is needing more time and capacity than we anticipated, and so we have to reevaluate, priorities, or the legislature gives, some additional direction to the EQB and we need to reevaluate that, let's do that.
Thank you for that comment. And I would echo that too, that just a concern, the capacity of our tech reps from the agency standpoint, capacity of EQB staff. And I think everything you have in here is great. It is a lot of work. There's a lot to do in 25 and then beyond too. And what you were just saying, Director Nuschler, about laying out a timeline and understanding maybe shifting priorities within as we get different directions, staying flexible on that, I think is going to be important. So thank you for recognizing that. Other comments or questions from board members? Hearing any. I know we also are, besides board member comments and questions, are going to make an opportunity for the public, right, to comment on the work plan. And before we consider it further as a board. So we will go through a sign-up sheet for the work plan comments. And if so, why don't we call on folks?
There was one member who had signed up, I think, to talk at the end of the meeting and had to leave, and there are no people that have their hands raised at this time.
For the work plan. Okay, thank you, Colleen. All right, yes.
Boring question I could ask. How does it work when a request comes from the legislature? Does that immediately become the thing that the appropriate staff and the EQB have to jump on, or is it I can finish the thing I'm working on and then I can get to it, or does it depend on the context?
It depends on the context and when it's due. But the two directives for rulemaking are pretty much you must. One has
timeline.
With a timeline, right? That's what I was just going to say. One of them has a deadline of, I think, no, we have to sort of put out our rulemaking by November 2025, and then one has a deadline of, I think it's May 2026. And so my plan is to share more with all of you about that in probably February. Those two particular rulemakings, the legislature has authorized a faster process. So that does mean it will be less intense. And also they've scoped them. They've kind of said, this is what you need to do within this specific box. But yeah, I mean, if the legislature says you must, then you must.
By law, we must. That's
So-
right. And that's where the flexibility needs to kind of come in with other things that are outside of the statute.
And is that within the work plan itself? I mean, do you feel like you have a good sense of how to reorganize or reprioritize things when it comes up? Or is it just the nature of the work is that you respond as needed and there isn't really a way to pre-plan for that?
I think in general, you can't, if the people who think they can predict what the legislature is going to do should be, I don't know, in Vegas or somewhere making a lot of money, because it's unpredictable. So yeah, you just respond. I think one of the things with doing this strategic plan is that, there's some of the things on our work plan or things that people might ask us to do that are a little less aligned. And I think that would be where we would go looking for, okay, this people would like us to do it. Maybe it's less contributory to the specific strategies and the specific outcomes that we have wanted to focus on. And so that's part of how I'm hoping we can use the strategic plan. Or if people say, hey, can you take on this thing that maybe is outside our scope, to say, are we really the right place? Like, this is kind of where we want to focus. Is there someone else? I don't know what that might be, but that's I hope to use it to help us do that organization.
Any other question? Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, talking about those rulemakings, they seem to be about stuff that, it's oil and gas production, spent fuel, CO2 pipelines, and then those infrastructure. Those are all things that are sort of primarily in PUC or department jurisdiction. So can you say a little bit more like what does EQB have to do about those?
Sure. So the Minnesota Energy Infrastructure Permitting Act that passed last year changes up kind of a lot of the PUC energy permitting related to transmission lines and things like that. And that just in our rules in 4410, there's a lot of reference to PUC rules or to PUC statutes that were stripped out or that were repealed. So a lot of that energy infrastructure one is pretty, I would say pretty scoped. Like the legislature got rid of Minnesota Rule 7849 and your rule refers to that. So you've got to get rid of your cross reference. So a lot of that is really just cleanup. Or they directed, they said, well, that now I think they said Commerce should be the RGU for independent spent fuel and not the PUC or vice versa. So that one is very just cleaning up cross references but a lot of things moved around. And so we've been working, Colleen and others have been working with Jenna and folks at Commerce and PUC. So we're all reading the statute. Do we all understand how it works? What got moved around? And figuring all of that out to just make it all align. The oil and gas one is going to be more like new. I think essentially it's driven primarily, and maybe Commissioner Stroman can talk more about that, because right now DNR is convening this technical advisory group to figure out what do we need to do in Minnesota to have a regulatory framework for like the extraction of gas to deal with this, primarily with this find of helium. And so there's going to be, I think, multiple state agencies were given authority to make rules. So that one's going to be, I think for us, it would be saying what should be in 4410, like what size, what type, when should those kinds of projects go through environmental review?
And Madam Chair, I would just add to that, while the section of statute and the direction from the legislature was for a task force on gas and oil production, we are not really talking oil production. You're not talking oil wells. So to just allay some fears, we're actually trying to get away from that language. We're really talking about non-petroleum gas extraction, as Director Nuschler said, related to the discovery of the helium deposits in Minnesota. And once that happened, a recognition that we don't have a regulatory framework for Minnesota, and that I think there might have been one Department of Health sort of permit that would have, the entire framework would have hung on. So, DNR is the sort of minerals agency, right, was directed to come up with a temporary regulatory framework, and then ultimately, right, there will be a longer term framework, but it has to align with, environmental review and permitting generally. So there's multiple agencies that will do that, but it really is creating a new regulatory framework for those non-petroleum gases.
And we will talk more about that. I think the team is putting together a report that will go out publicly, and we'll talk more about that, I think, in October, likely, when that's out. That sort of that first draft. Jesse has a whole new textbook on helium. He's very excited about it.
And I will say, if you ever wondered if your high school chemistry was, going to come into play and be useful, this is where it does.
All right, with that, any other questions before we take up a motion? All right, could I have a motion then to approve of the resolution approving the work plan? I'll make the motion. Thank you, Board Member Hens. May I have a second? Oh, thank you, Board Member Brands. All right. Any further discussion on the motion? Then is this a roll call vote?
It's just checking to see if we had board members online, and we do. So yes, Madam Chair, I think we need to go ahead and do the roll call.
Great.
Okay. All right. Commissioner Arnold with us. Board Member Bakken. Board Member Bauerkemper.
Yes.
Board Member Brands.
Yes.
Commissioner Cunningham is not with us. Chair Daubenberger.
Yes.
And Commissioner Grandval. That's a leave. Board Member Hintz.
Yes.
Chair Holman.
Yes.
Board Member Katzenberger.
Yes.
Commissioner Kessler. I think she had to leave as well. Board Member Martin.
Yes.
Commissioner Barilek. Board Member Nelson.
Yes.
Commissioner Peterson.
Yes.
Board Member Smith.
Yes.
Commissioner Stroman.
Aye.
11 ayes and 6 non-present.
Well, passes. Right. We have
you
an
all.
approved work plan. Thanks for all the work on the work plan, QP. director and staff. All right, and I know that only gives us a couple more minutes, but our final agenda item is for public comment. Sounds like the one we had signed up has left the building. But one note for the board members, we did receive a written comment soon after last month's meeting, the July meeting, and that is in your. So please take note of that if you have not seen that yet. Has anyone else signed up other than the one who was?
I just have Gail, and I believe it was Gail who had to leave. Are there any hands online? Thanks so much.
All right. So no additional public comments then for today's meeting. So then that brings us to closing and adjournment. I just want to say again, thank you. It was great having so many people here in person today. It was having lunch with folks, so a lot more energy in the room with more people present. But thank you to those who weren't able to come in person to and join online and public. And with that, we've reached the end of the agenda. So I will look for a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Peterson. Second.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Thank you. Motion passes. Meeting is adjourned. Thanks again, everyone.
Well.
Nice meeting you.